Foremost as our leading criteria. We also want to be compatible with possible long-range planning, or at least anticipating what that could look like. Our preference is to reinstitute the middle school. We put it temporarily on hold because of COVID. Our current grade structure we felt was a better fit, especially because of transportation concerns. So we'd like to have either a 5-7 middle school or a 6-8 middle school. Our preference is also to have 5th graders in the elementary schools, if we can possibly do it. We've heard that loud and clear throughout the year, as well as through a staff feedback that we received. And we want to relieve overcrowding at the high school. I think our high school staff has done a good job as far as accommodating the 7th through 12th graders. But at the end of the day, I don't think it's a workable option. So we'd like to do that as well. The problem with, well, you can see the options listed. A and B would be the options that would include a 6-8 middle school. In other words, a middle school accommodating 6th, 7th, and 8th graders. This would be our preferred option if we could possibly make it happen. We think that a high school for grades 9 through 12 is a better fit overall. It would also free up space so that we could have a really strong community school model, if that's the direction we want to go. We also believe that a 6-8 middle school is advantageous, first because of programming focus on students, and some other advantages would include like pathways, alternative learning for 6th and 7th graders in one building instead of at multiple elementary buildings. 6th grade band and other instructional and after school activities would be held in one place. Access to the pool for swimming instruction is also an advantage. Those are also advantages of a 5-7 middle school as well. The big determining reason that we'd really like to see a K-5 school is that we'd like to have the 5th grade classrooms with elementary kids instead of the older 6th and 7th graders. At the end of the day though, we crunched the numbers as far as how many students we're expecting, our class size ratios, available rooms at both Sunnyside and Burnside. We can make it work mathematically. We can fit the kids in grades K through 5 in those 2 buildings. The problem is that we have to have everything go our way in terms of attendance zones, assignments to the elementary schools. You know, as far as how many 2nd graders we have, for example, and 3rd graders. If we have a bubble class, then we really stretch it out too thin. And you know, there's just so many unknowns that we just don't advise having K-5 elementary schools at this time. Maybe down the line, maybe 4 years from now, we would, or 3 years, or whatever the time frame might be, we could possibly consider that. As we have fewer kids in each grade, then we might be able to accommodate K-5 elementary school at some point in the future. But right now, we just have enough kids so that if we added 4 or 5 more, we might need an extra classroom, and then we have some space issues at Sunnyside and Burnside. So right now, we're leaning towards recommending 2 elementary schools for kids in grades K through 4, or grade level centers. So it might be kindergarten, 1st grade, and then 2nd, 3rd, and 4th at Burnside. We'd have a 5-7 middle school, and then back to the 8-12 high school. That's where we are right now. But we wanted to, well, all of us wanted to discuss this at the board level, because if you're in agreement with our thinking, then we'll really fine tune the recommendations and, you know, come in with the pros and cons of 2 or 3 different models.
Can I ask, to clarify, you're saying option C,
I was just gonna ask that too.
right? Like
That seems
A through J, but I'm gonna go with C.
Yeah. Thank you. Much
Yeah.
simpler to say it that way.
Yeah.
I will say, option C for Twin Bluff in the high school. Sunnyside and Burnside in option C show grades K through 4. And we'd like to add a variation of that for early childhood through grade 1 at Sunnyside, and then grades 2 through 4 at Burnside. Culver would still have early childhood programming, but we'd like to consider that variation. And I see Holly looking through the options to see where it matches, and I don't think it's listed.
Okay,
So,
that's okay, because then I'm gonna add HIJK. Option K would be then a twist of all that, right? Well, yeah, twist combo, but adding early childhood to possibly the K1?
correct.
So option C is, both Sunnyside and Burnside would be K4. Option D is the grade level centers like we had before, K2 to 4. But the same separation between the middle school and high school, 5, 7, and 8, 12.
Yeah, when we came to the realization that we don't want to take a risk as far as moving K through 5 into 2 buildings, just because too many things could go wrong, and then all of a sudden we're switching kids at the last minute and disrupting their lives. And we came to that realization last Friday and then over the weekend, and we talked about the possibility of early childhood through grade 1 at Sunnyside and then 2 through 4 at Burnside. But I will say, right now those are our leading choices. We need to have our transportation company then take a second run at the transportation costs to see if it all makes sense.
So now these options we're talking about, other than the one that you talked about with early childhood and K and 1 in one place, you would keep early childhood at Cobble?
All the scenarios keep some early childhood at Colville.
Okay.
But
Yeah.
we might be looking at expanding early childhood with the universal child. Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's why you're thinking,
Yeah, if we could carve out some space at Sunnyside for possible expansion of our early childhood programming, we think that would be a very smart move.
how many, is there 20 classrooms at Sunnyside?
Roughly.
And then I asked Jen, bro, 28 or 26 at Burnside?
We assume 24 regular education classrooms at Burnside. And then of course we have specialists, we have special education case managers and services in some of the other rooms. So, but the ideal classroom use, for the regular classroom instruction would be 20 at Sunnyside and 24 at Burnside.
So that would be 8 kindergarten and 8 first grade, or 9, 7, and then potential early childhood space.
Yeah, so the potential space at Sunnyside would be up to 4 different classrooms.
Would it
In
be,
addition to what we have at
would it
Colville.
be special ed, or would it be Head Start, or?
I do not believe it would be Head Start, but really Brittany Keel, our early childhood director, Don Weddern, our director of community education and recreation, and then Marshall Walker would really need to figure out what classes would be there, how would special ed interact, with the kindergarten and first graders, and then how do we maintain the balance with Colville.
So it's like a D+ option,
There you go.
option D+.
Yeah. So again, more work has to be done. We wanted to run this by the school board first before we went another mile with transportation and with scheduling and programming. So, but that's where we are right now.
So just, I'm glad Holly and Pam asked those questions, because I was confused again myself, because you said loud and clear, you heard 5th grade at the elementary model, and all of a sudden you jumped to C, which is 5th grade at Twin Bluff Middle School. So this makes sense. C makes sense, but how you got to it was confusing.
Yeah.
We're actually
You
doing E.
just, Huh?
We're actually looking at E.
Yeah, C or D.
See,
right
that's
around.
the,
I'm just thinking.
no, it's not you,
Yeah.
it's not you, it's not you, I'm just saying, it's all over the board here instead of, okay, so D we're looking at then, not C,
Well, C or D. The difference between the two is whether it's grade level centers or the
yeah, I see.
location based.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah,
I like
my
that.
apologies.
I like that, I like the idea, I like C and D because I think we're overcrowded at the high school. We have a lot of room at the middle school that is not being utilized. And our numbers, we don't know what our numbers will be next year for the elementary because of what's coming into town, the expansion of that. So, yeah, I think that makes, this C and or D makes sense to me.
Yeah, or like Holly said, a D, a plus option would be to change instead of K2 for Sunnyside and 2-4 for Burnside. It could be early childhood through grade 1 for Sunnyside and then 2 through 4 for Burnside. So just a slight adjustment. We do not believe there will be a bubble class that would require 9 sections in a particular grade for several years, except for one that's currently going through the system.
Which one is that?
I think it's 3rd grade. But then after that grade makes it to grade 5, or to Twin Bluff, then we don't see a bubble class coming up.
Yeah, I think it's great. I appreciate the thought and all the options that are sitting out here. I believe we are looking at possibly talking about a public information forum on this at our board meeting, and I'm grateful for that. So at this point, it's just guidance, and if we get to end up doing narrowing down the options and maybe explaining what other stuff we looked at. I know what I want to get to, and I'm very grateful for the study that's coming to look at where we are, because one of the sore spots with me since I came on this board is 5th graders at Twin Bluff. I don't believe that's optimal. I still think myself 7th and 8th here could work if we did modifications, but I'm not looking to spend money right now. And so right now, the true order of everything the way most towns do is 6 through 8. What we've done in this district that's bothered me for a long time is we've made the kids fit the building instead of our buildings built to accommodate the optimum for our kids. That being said, I do like the 6 through 8, but I don't think it's feasible at this time for this upcoming year. So we got something that has generally worked that we're used to with the 5th grade being at Twin Bluff. I think that's probably where we need to head for next year, and then it comes down to the other options that fit into it and stuff. That's where I'm headed right now. From what I'm hearing, when you look at these options and hearing what you're saying, I think it's great. I'm looking forward to that study, and I think it's going to come out that we need to figure out how to get the 5th graders into elementary and the middle school 6 through 8. As far as crowdedness at the high school, it's hard for me to understand it, but I know because we laid out and probably had a community effort, but this building was built to handle 300 kids per class for 4 grades, grades 9 through 12. That's 1,200 students. So the number isn't here, it's just not laid out right when you start putting 6th grades versus 4 grades and all our other needs. And times have changed from 95 to now. So the space isn't here. I acknowledge that. As much as I want to say the room is here, it's not built right for lunch and everything else that goes with it. So I look forward to further discussion later, but I'm going to say I'm basically on with the K through 5 and 2 elementary buildings. I personally have a preference for 2 separate K through 5s, but you know, public input will tell us a lot. And both of them can work. So thank you.
I had the fortunate experience of being one of the teachers when we started the 5th grade at Twin Bluff. I was a 5th grade teacher there, special ed teacher, and it was not ideal. The 5th graders were not ready for that level of movement and that level of independence. But I understood why they did it because of the numbers, and I understand this moving at least seventh grade back into a middle school model and keeping sixth grade obviously as middle school. But I would prefer to have 6, 7, 8 at the middle school. Yeah, the fifth graders just, and no matter how much you try to prep them for this is what you have to do in a middle school, they still were not ready to conceptually get that they were going to move all, move throughout the building in this capacity and not be the leaders. They wanted to be the leaders, but they couldn't be because they were the littlest ones. And as far as the grade level centers, I was one of the people when we went to that originally, like, no, middle schools, no. But then I understood it. It doesn't make any sense to have 2 K5s when we're not a K5 perfect split down the middle in Redmond. Right? If we were, that would make sense, but we're not. So we have to be equitable across the board in all capacities. And it shouldn't depend on zip code, but it shouldn't depend on where you live, on whether or not you get the services that you're entitled to. If you're a first grader and you need whatever services, they're at the first grade building. It shouldn't be, oh, but they have better ones over at X. Too bad you can't get the bus to X. And then next thing you know, you'll be arguing about why can't my kid get the bus to X.
Specifically, that some, in the past, we'd have second graders who qualify for certain special education services would be assigned to one of the buildings. And I think the same for English learners.
Yeah, which
So
isn't
that
equitable.
creates some issues.
Yeah.
Yeah, I do think that that'll be the big issue when we need to decide at an upcoming meeting. Would we have lieutenant's own schools or the grade level centers? And sometimes I get the bad habit of calling them neighborhood schools, but really they aren't. Because if we have the 2 elementary schools serving grades K through 4, there will be quite a few kids who live close to Sunnyside, but they'll end up being bused over to Burnside just because of the reasons you said, called Hawkins Tower.
And I was going to say one more thing, but I'm hoping that we can have this decision by the end of February. I saw that you put in the notes the 16th or 17th for the public forum, if we can come to a consensus on having the people come and speak, which I'd love to hear from, but then having it wrapped up by our February 22nd meeting. That's what I'm hoping for to get this thing moving.
Yeah.
I think that'd be good if we can if there's enough time between getting the feedback before that meeting on the 22nd. So, I don't know who's first.
Arm wrestle for it?
As long as you don't have to leg wrestle.
One is, I really hope that our district is never in a position that says we can offer these kind of services in this building, but we can't offer that same quality of services in this building. I sure hope that we're never in a position where that is the case. Maybe it has been in the past, but I think whatever plan we come up with, it would be really great if if we look at it in the lens, from an equity lens, and make sure that whatever plan is produced and we move forward with that, it is equitable, whether it's grade centers or, however the configuration ends up. I think my top priorities have already been talked about tonight. I think it's absolutely imperative that we hear from stakeholders. As a parent of a 5th grader, I think my 5th grader was one of the first in that class to move to that building, and I was very worried as a parent, but I felt like the district really handled that well and not moving our 5th graders, that they stayed somewhat contained in this area. My soon-to-be 5th grader, we walked through the building probably 10 times that summer, just so she knew how to get from the door to her locker room to her classroom, so I really appreciated how the district worked with our students and willingness to work with our students back then. But I agree, everything that I've heard from teachers to parents, we all want a middle school back for many reasons. Twin Bluff Middle School, bless its heart, has had to, what you said, Arlen, we're making the kids fit the building doesn't fit the kids. And I know, administrators in that building have lost sleep worrying about that pool and little kids and what if, and all of those horrible scenarios you never want to go down. So I think we need to get back to that middle school. I'm super happy that that's a part of the option here. And I agree with you, let's sooner rather than later. Families need to plan, but we also need to plan for our staffing. And as part of the negotiations, we have talked with Education Minnesota about, there's going to be a change coming, and how can we make sure that we put everything in place to support teachers, make sure that it's a fair process for when we move people around, how is that going to play out? So that has been addressed with Education Minnesota, and I think that we'll discuss that a little bit later, but I think that they're very much willing to work with us, and we've come up with a really good solution on how that will play out for teachers and staff long-term as we make those changes.
That's right.
Thank you. Yeah, good discussion. With bit of history too. I don't remember the building being built for 300 classes, because I think I graduated in 1975 and we had 325 kids, the largest one ever. And I don't think we've had many 300 people classes.
2001, my son had 300.
2001, so 20 some years ago. So I was a ninth grader when middle school was open. It was 7 through 9. Prior to that, the old high school, we had 7 through 12. Tyler remembers that. The bell rang and you were just like cattle. Getting in and just shuffled because you couldn't cut across to your class. You had to go around and follow the line around. Well needed. But I think every now and then we have to look at, because we don't know how many kids we're gonna have from year to year. So we can't build buildings based upon kids totally. We have to build upon what we have for kids that are coming and move accordingly. We do also have, don't forget, we have now a playground at the middle school too, that we didn't have a year ago, or 2 years ago, or 3 years ago. So that helps alleviate some of that feeling that maybe a certain grade level should be back in elementary. This might help them adjust as well. So
I was a playground supervisor.
what's that?
I was a playground supervisor that year for the 5th graders.
Now they have one fenced in area.
Yeah.
We just had a cement pad.
We just went out the back doors and it was a free-for-all. And we were roped off in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
The playground will be helpful, but it won't hold all the 5th graders at one time. So you're gonna have to do stations and rotations of who gets to jump on the playground if 5th graders are there. But at one point, they even considered getting rid of recess for 5th graders because it was so cumbersome. So, and I was not in favor of that, as they were crawling out the windows. No.
I'm looking forward to that. Let's pick a date today to the next meeting, have that public meeting and have input. So we can beat this thing forever. But I really want to hear from the stakeholders like Ms. Rose said.
So one thing that I didn't see as an option in here, just wondering about the space, is like having the middle school 5-8. I'm just thinking that if our ideal goal is to move 5th graders into the elementary buildings, what would be the least amount of shuffling when we are at the numbers to make that happen? So if the middle school was 5-8, but I don't know if there's enough room. I doubt that there is, but if you knew, because you have the breakdown of how many rooms are needed and how many rooms are available for Sunnyside and Burnside, and how many rooms are available at Twin Bluff, but how many rooms would be needed if there were 4 grade levels there.
Yeah.
I don't think it's the ideal, but also shuffling people around all the time and not having that consistency is also not ideal. So I'm just wondering if it's at all an option. And if it's not, fine. But if our consensus collective goal is for 5th graders to move back to the elementary, then we should be trying to make plans for that to be as seamless as possible, I think.
Yeah, I should have included that as option K.
Okay.
Because we looked at a 5-grade model, because I was thinking the same thing as you, when you lost the door. And both Mike Pagel and Chris Palmetier looked at the numbers. And of course, Mr. Palmetier knows that building inside and out. And we would be shifting the problem that we have at Sunnyside and Burnside in terms of elementary enrollment right over to Twin Bluff. Because we would be at the max or above the max at Twin Bluff. So, yeah, we did look at that. A 5-8 middle school is a fairly common model, throughout the country. A 6-8 is probably the most common. 5-8 is right in there too. There are very few schools with a 5-7 model. Doesn't mean it's right or wrong, and I think for now, it's the right fit in Red Wing, but we did look at that possibility.
One thing we haven't talked much, it was mentioned a little bit about Jefferson School, but in the cost and everything else, one thing nobody mentioned is the idea of maybe just one floor of Jefferson being. And if we could get 4 to 6 classrooms that way, and maybe the principal at Sunnyside would do that. I know there's a lot of negatives to doing it, but is it something we should maybe take a look at if we want to be going to that 6 through 8 model next year? What would it cost us to do something like that? Should we do something like that? The equity issue comes up then, because what doesn't that school have that Sunnyside would have or Burnside has? So I just kind of toss that in there as one little side thing, because I think we can make the majority of our handicap accessibility issues other than the bathrooms without major modification. We stay at one floor.
And I'm sorry, somebody else is gonna.
Oh, I was just gonna ask Karsten about the busing zones, because it's my understanding they're not coded right. You need so much space for the buses to come in. You need so much space for parents to be able to drop off. That's been my understanding about that. Am I wrong?
We have, as everyone knows, Jefferson's not an ideal, building. Mr. Garrett did mention one possible mitigation strategy of sorts, and that's just to use the top or the bottom of the first floor. And that's really memorialized in some ways with option I. Where we would include Jefferson. There's some different variations as far as what we do with Sunnyside and Burnside. The biggest negatives that we saw would be that we would have to set our transportation zones so that just the right amount of kids would be at Jefferson, and that really complicates things. So the fewer the elementary schools we have serving a particular grade, the better, because then we have fewer decisions to make if we have too few kids at Jefferson or too many kids at Jefferson in terms of adding teachers, and moving teachers around. So it can be quite costly, first to run the building, but then also to figure out how many teachers we need so we have fairly equitable class sizes.
Anybody have anything else about the grade or the school configurations?
I was gonna speak to Pam's point. Ideally, absolutely, you'd want equity at both spaces. It doesn't work cost-wise often, because you may have this many students on IEPs at this building and this many students on IEPs at this building. That teacher would have to split buildings, possibly 0.3, 0.7. It gets really, and then why, when that teacher's 0.7 over there, they're one extra body to help with recess, to help with, versus that body over there, they don't get it. So that's where it gets really tricky and it gets expensive. Because I don't see us hiring another teacher for special ed per se, so that each building can have the same amount of staff if the numbers don't add up.
Yeah, it sounds like in general, although, I think I would love to have a different configuration if we could make it happen, but I just don't think it can happen this year. But it feels like the areas we should focus on primarily would be a 5-7 middle school, and then either attendance zone or grade level centers at the elementary. Is that what I'm hearing, or do you think we could really just focus on grade level centers?
I think that's something where parents are going to want to weigh in.
Okay.
I mean, that's something that I just think it comes up all the time. Everybody has their pros and cons, and And I'm totally on the fence with it, both as a parent and having worked in the schools. I see lots of things that have been great, having multiple ages in the class, in a building, and things that have been not great. And vice versa with, before. So
Okay.
I think I would personally like to leave it open at this point.
All the options?
Well, I think between C and D,
Yeah.
whether
You make
we
it,
do.
you get 8, 10, 12 options, we're gonna put people all over the
Yeah.
board, and then we'll figure it out.
But
Give them a couple
between-
of places.
That with K4, the decision is really whether K4 is split with 2 schools being K4, or if it's split to grade level.
But it's not really. I mean, I don't want to give false hope to parents or to family members that this could actually be an option. When if you look at it on the table with all of the things that are in place, it's not. It is grade level centers if you want to be equitable, period. There's no equity in attendance zones. Those two things don't go together. It's grade level centers for equity, or it's attendance zones and we throw it to the wall and see what we get. Not that I don't want to hear from the community. That's not it, but if I felt it was a viable option, then I would say absolutely. But if you put it all on paper and say, if we're going to be the most equitable we can be in Revenue Public Schools, it is not K4 schools. 2 K4 schools, it's just not. So is it, giving false hope to people for them to say, but if we have this point, will you consider it? No. And yes, of course we'll consider it, but when you put it down on paper and put it out there, it's not equitable.
Now I understand what you're meaning by not equitable, because one building's older, or we have different staff that have different abilities, or what is it that's not equitable between Sunnyside and Burnside if we go K4 and K4?
If you look at all of the dynamics of where people live in their attendance areas, you're going to have people with different income bases in each part. So what is equitable about that?
So you're talking about the people who are attending, not the structure that we're providing?
Yes. And also students with IEPs and our REACH program. What's the program? 6th grade?
Pathways?
The Pathways program. It's really difficult to have a Pathways program at 2 schools when it's not that big. So then you could have Pathways here, one Pathways teacher who has to go back. That doesn't make any sense. So which school becomes the Pathways school?
No, that'd be true for K6 because it's a 6th and 7th grade program.
Right.
K4, it won't be an issue, but I think that's an example of how it could be an issue.
Yes, you're right, Kristen, you're totally right. You're right, Ken, that is a 6th grade, but when we're thinking about which school gets what, which school gets this special ed teacher for this program, and that's literally how it breaks down. This school has the specialized program for this group of students. This school has the specialized program for this group of students. In order to split those down the middle and pay for that, it gets very expensive.
Can I okay, so we were in an equity committee meeting, and that was the first time I heard of those 2 terms, was the attendance zones and grade levels. I've always been a very neighborhood school. I grew up in a neighborhood school. This is what triggered my memory of in that moment. I heard the N-word for the very first time when I was in 7th grade when we got to the middle school. I had the comfort of my tiny, small elementary school where I heard it because I was called Prairie, N-word. That's how I heard it. And so I asked my mom what it meant, and that's what was my first lesson on racism. My kids, they got to do be with everybody in their grade. So they know every single person that they've gone to school with, and I think that's really awesome. But I feel sheltered, almost robbed to not be amongst everybody else in my time. I felt, yes, my experience was great, but, I feel like sheltered at 7th grade. I didn't hear anything until seventh grade. But, you know, so that's just what my memory, from an equitable standpoint, what that triggered for me, was my own experience with racism inside the school.
Well, did you?
Yeah, just something, I understand all the equity that's been brought up here, but there's many, many other equities that come into it that probably aren't as important. Is it equitable that you live way out in Welch and you have to go to Sunnyside instead of Burnside? So you might ride the bus an hour, I'm making these numbers up, you might ride the bus an hour versus if they had the school at Burnside, it'd be half an hour and they'd be half-hour bus ride. There's other equity things too, and I'm not touting that as right or wrong. So I just want us to be open-minded, listen to everybody. And I think we're probably gonna end up where you're talking, but I just think we have to look at, there's more to equity in just available staff. There's getting there, but certainly it's very difficult to have, when you have one neighborhood going to one school, another neighborhood going to another school, and they might be affluent versus not affluent, and it's hard. I understand both ends of the conversation, and I'm not gonna judge it one way or another either, so, but I'm just pointing out there's other things to equity besides what we're talking about. Bus rides are concerned, no longer on the bus. So, and there are other examples, I guess I think about. Yeah, probably very few.
I don't disagree with you at all, Arlen. If we had an unlimited bank account, I'd say knock ourselves out. We don't. We have finite resources, and we know that.
But somebody's hour-long bus ride, compared to my experience with racism, is not even comparable. And also the fact that there's never been somebody like me bringing these concerns to the table before. But don't compare an hour-long bus ride followed by what I just gave as an example. That's not equity.
I'm not saying to compare that by itself. I'm saying look at all the options, there are other things.
All options have always been looked at, Arlen, except for racism.
Well, we will have a vote in the meeting about whether we have a community forum and what that looks like and those kinds of
Sounds
things.
good.
So I think we'll move on for now. Okay, so then we have our other topics, which is all the rest of what were the standing committees. So, Jackie has stuff for finance for us.
And by the way, as she's coming up, thank you for the discussion. It really helps kind of refine the next stage, and so we'll do whatever we can to supply the information we need.
Well, good evening. So in your packet is the reports that would normally go to Finance Committee on the fourth Monday of the month. I'm going to run through them quickly. Please ask questions. Also included is the proposed revised budget and the proposed 5-year projection based on the revised budget. The first item in your packet is the treasurer's report for December. So what we're looking at here is cash balances on hand as of December 31st, 2021, compared to cash balances on hand for the last 2 prior years. This is not necessarily a finite indicator of fund balance, but it at least tells us the direction our fund balance is moving. On the second page there is a list of our investments outstanding as of December 31st. Are there any questions? Yes.
How much of this fund balance is covered through COVID dollars?
COVID dollars are a spend and reimburse program, so none of it.
Cash on hand's not there.
Correct.
And then on your investment, Associated Bank, we took a bond out for a day.
That is not a bond.
It said
It says STA, which is savings account.
Associated Bank, FDA,
Yep, savings account.
12/31/21, 12/31/21.
It's in our bond trust account. That's what that means. So that account there is funds remaining from our 2016 bond referendum.
Just confusing by start
Yeah.
date and end date, the same date.
Yep, it's a savings account, which is why it has the start date and the end date as the same day, because that was the interest rate on that day. Other questions?
Not specifically on how this breaks down, but I really liked how you added it, the breakdowns in, when we get to the board meeting, in the packet of what we've spent on ESSER funds for each level. So it's not specifically related to this right now.
Right.
But this is all part of it, obviously. But if I would put my brain together and try to pull from that pot into this pot, I can't do it. So I'm just gonna end that.
Okay. The next report I'll draw your attention to is we look at a snapshot of enrollment about the middle of each month. And we try to use this to project an average enrollment for the year to see how we're coming out to budget. So you'll see enrollment data there for our seat-based programs through January. You'll also see a couple rows for our estimated tuition out. Tuition out kids would include students at Five Rivers Online, the Pathways 812 program, the Setting For program at DCED, and also Tower View. Those would all be our largest tuition out programs, but it could also include if we have a student who is going to a program at Intermediate 287 or Intermediate 917, because that is where the family has chosen to place them. So it's all of our tuition out students. If you scroll down, there's a lot of numbers on this report, but the number we want to look at is in the light blue there, which is variance versus budget. And this is pulling off of the proposed revised budget numbers of 2538. We are currently 18 students ahead, which is a good, comfortable spot. I like that kind of to be in the 10 to 15 ahead. It is a good cushion for us, just in case something unexpected happens through the last half of the year.
We have this at each of our finance meetings. It's always a topic of conversation, where we're going to be with students, especially in the second half of the year as kids and K, more 12th graders go to PSEO, I think it is, and all that. I'm just looking at the enrollment numbers here from when we started in September through January, and we're down, what are we down? 64 students. That must be an average of 2503. I think that trend is probably not going to go up. It's going to go down. The 2503, the average will be my estimation, because every month, except for one, we went down. And so I think we should be more realistic about what we're planning to do with our budget than what the current estimate is through 5 months.
And you said this was a snapshot at the middle of the month. So the January numbers would have been before second semester started?
Correct.
We got the online, like she said, too, that is going through.
Do we know if our Five Rivers Online tuition out number is consistent from the start of the year, or is
It is growing.
so that might be where we're seeing some of these numbers of tuition out, or just less enrollment because of tuition out, might be attributable to Five Rivers Online. I'm not saying that, I'm just trying to be positive, isn't that we have less kids in the district, or indirectly we have the same number, maybe, and some more of them are going towards Five Rivers.
Yeah, there is some of that going on, that is for sure. Other things we usually see in the second half of the year is students who are in danger of not graduating might go to Tower View to try to make up those credits in the second half of the year, which would again turn them from out of our seat-based program and into our tuition programs.
I noticed when I was on the finance committee over the years, was a trend that we tend to have the second half of the year where the numbers do move.
Go down. Okay, I have a question for you now related to to this, but a finance question, but I can wait until everybody gets this stuff out. I don't want to forget.
Councilman, can I ask you a question?
Sure.
Do you recall how many fewer resident students we have this year compared to last year?
I don't have this year's number, but last year compared to the year before was 86, I believe.
And that's a real important figure because it shows that we have a lot more kids moving out of the district than moving into it. So, I mean, that's a huge factor. Plus, we, have open enrollment to other districts and 5-0, but that's an important consideration as well.
Mm-hmm. It might be at some point, I don't know if we want to tackle it this spring, but in the next couple of years, time to get a education demographer to come in and do a study.
I like that.
The other reports is we have a budget report as of 12/31. It compares the revised budget to the previous 2 years. We don't always spend dollar for dollar in the same manner, but percentage of budget wise, we do tend to spend in the same manner. So that's what we're looking at. As of December 31st, this first page is all general fund. We'd received $11,244,908, or 29% of the revised budget, compared to 30.5% and 29.76%. So we are trending on budget there. Those numbers line up. For expenditures, we've expended $14,671,297, or 37.99% of our budget, compared to 40.37 and 40.78. So we can see our trend there is we are expending less than we have in the prior 2 years. Most notably, it looks like in the equipment area, equipment and other expenditures. As you page through this report, the second page goes into our other funds. You can see the same kind of data for food service, community education, and all of the other district funds. And then the remaining pages of this report are breakouts, further breakouts of this summary budget if you're curious. How much have we received in property taxes? How much have we spent on teacher salary? That is the remainder of the report. And I usually don't go into detail on that unless somebody has a specific question. So are there any questions on the budget report? All right, the next report I'll draw your attention to is the revised budget for, proposed revised budget for 21-22. Page 1 is a summary of all the funds. You can see this has a projected to add $214,692 to the unassigned fund balances, which is what the state and other districts use to compare themselves for financial or fiscal responsibility, but financial health. Be about a 14.4% of our expenditures. This is a change. Originally, we had in our adopted budget, we were going to spend $110,000. So we've moved that the other way. Unfortunately, the way we've moved it is we've had a number of open positions, which we were unable to fill for the first half of the year. So now we have, instead of budgeting them for a full year, we're only needing to budget them for half a year, because we are still working to fill those positions. The page 2 is just a summary of some of the major changes from the adopted budget to the revised budget. The remaining pages show the changes. The most noted change in here is we decreased our enrollment down to 2538 from 2551 essentially, and added in 1.98 million of federal American Rescue Plan, or as we've talked about it, ESSER funds. Most of these pages here are just different breakdowns and comparisons, so you can see where the major changes are. Page 6 is another graph on showing you different changes in fund balance, and then page 7 is enrollment history and 1-year grade level changes. both in data and then in graphical form. Are there any questions on the revised budget?
And the revised budget will be presented for approval at the next meeting, not today's.
Not
meeting, but the next meeting.
The final piece of information in your packet for tonight is the 5-year budget projection based on the revised budget. So the first page is history leading up to the 2022 revised budget. It shows our changes in revenue and expenditures for years historically. This is only general fund now, just not food. This does not include food service, does not include community ed. The second page is the revised budget then looking forward. So the revised budget is on the left, looking forward to 2027. The number I want you to note on here is our projected deficit budget for next year. Our budget deficit for next year is 1.4 million. So administration will be working on a plan to write that deficit, and we'll present that to you at a future meeting, but I wanted to show you that number. And then the final page,
And that's assuming losing 41
students, correct.
Is it assuming the current year's grade configurations in the next year,
Yes,
along with busing?
along with busing. It assumes everything stays as is. So if we make a shift, that will help us reconcile the budget or might add to it depending on how we shift.
My next question.
Yes. The final page is just a summary of all of the changes. It notes that our unassigned fund balance goal is 5%. You can see the spending variance of 1.4 million there. End of year APUs, so EOY APUs is end of year adjusted pupil units. So that includes the weighting for the high school students. It tells us we meet our fund balance equity, and we are changing 41 adjusted pupil units.
May 41 may change.
May change.
You still have a question?
It's not related to this.
Okay,
It's money.
it's
And you
money.
might not know the number, or you might not know the answer off the top of your head.
Yep.
But I really want us to be cognizant of this. What is the differential in attendance zone schools versus grade level centers in financially? Have you done the breakdown analysis of what would cost more?
It would depend on where we broke the attendance zones. So like, I would need to get the data from transportation to see if this is the attendance zone, we're gonna need X sections at this school of this grade level. Because for example, if there was a census-wise, we had a large percentage of our second graders live near Sunnyside, well, maybe we need more sections of second grade there than I'm thinking. And less sections at, maybe I'm not explaining it right, but yeah, it kind of depends on where that line is for the attendance zone, how many sections we need in each building to make equitable class sizes.
But it really wouldn't be equitable then if we had to bubble, or a larger second grade section than a smaller grade section. Is that what I'm hearing?
Yeah, so let's take this year for example. We had planned on our normal class size ratios, but then when we got down to busing and attendance zones, we ended up having to add, I think it was 1 or 2 staff at the elementary level, at least one, yeah, to even out class sizes among the buildings. So that one section of kindergarten at Burnside wasn't 25, where a section of kindergarten at Twin Bluff maybe only had 20. So it is more costly to do attendance zones because it's harder to balance out class size.
More costly to do attendance zones because it's harder to balance. Can you give an estimated how much more?
I don't have that number right now.
Okay, that's a question that, you know, but I think that two things. 60% of the community doesn't have kids in school, right? They're voting on a referendum. They're voting on what's best for the whole community. And so when we think about who are we doing the changes for and why are we doing the changes? Are we doing it for a small group of people who come to a function and say, this is what I want for my kid, I want attendance zone schools, or are we doing it for the community? And that's why I don't want to give people false hope, right? If it's more expensive to do an attendance zone school, why would we consider that?
If I could,
Yeah, that's what I'm trying to wrap around my head.
Yeah, and we'll know a lot more when we fine tune the transportation numbers. But in general, grade level centers will be cheaper than attendance zone in terms of staffing. But it's more expensive in terms of busing. Because of the way our school district's set up.
Okay.
Burnside way at one end, Sunnyside, and so I think that's the part we're gonna have to look at. Are they roughly equal, or is one a lot more expensive than the other? I have some rough drafts of what our transportation company gave us, but I need them to fine tune it with the two options that we're really gonna look at. So we'll have better information.
In your rough drafts, are you talking thousands, tens of thousands,
Hundreds of thousands.
hundreds of thousands, in which direction?
As far as the staffing, it really depends on, like Jackie said, the attendance zones, where they're drawn. We could get lucky and it doesn't cost anything extra. That's highly unlikely, because, people have brothers and sisters, and so if you bus them to one school, then the brothers and sisters have to go to the same school, and that can kind of screw up the class sizes. We may not even know that impact until the summer. Because that's when all the transportation and school assignments are made. In terms of transportation, it could mean 3, 4, or even 5 more buses. And so we're talking, a difference of maybe $300,000 or $350,000.
Is there a chance that attendance zone schools could eventually be cheaper?
If theoretically, yes. Because of transportation. It all comes down to transportation. Yeah, so typically the neighborhood schools are cheaper because, the elementary runs they're not as long. And so you can drop them off and go back out, second time to pick up the secondary kids or vice versa. So, but then on the flip side, if the class sizes are skewed, then we could end up spending quite a bit of money on extra teachers with attendance zones.
And we're limited in space.
Depending on which model we choose. Yeah.
But I mean, Sunnyside only has 20 classrooms, Burnside only has 24.
Right.
So we could so let's say we do our zones. We've got 20 classrooms full here, but we have to have 3 extra sections of 2nd, 3rd, and 4th grade. So now we don't have enough 5th grade sections. So now we got to take the 5th graders that would go to this school and bus them all over here.
Potentially.
Which would not be a zone school.
Yeah, there's so many nuances to
moving
that.
parts. I just think it's important that we have as much information moving forward into these decisions so that we're not setting people up for.
Right.
X.
Yeah, it's, I wish I could say yes, for sure.
No, but
One
it
time
makes
is
sense
more
to me the way you're
expensive, but
explaining it. It really does.
very complicated. And unfortunately, those extra costs are not included in the budget projections for next year. So we'll end up likely spending more money on transportation and or more money on personnel. And we're gonna have to factor that in as we're making budget reconciliation decisions.
Thank you, Jackie.
And when we have that educational planner, are all of these considerations going to be part of that person's role when we make some longer term decision making? Because I think unfortunately some of our decision making might need to be driven in part by some financial considerations, which I hate. But, that's the reality of it. We have to be fiscally responsible as well for our, taxpayers and getting the most the best education that we possibly can in the buildings that we have and the resources at our disposal, so.
Yeah, short answer is yes, and that will be factored into longer range decision-making processes as well.
Good.
And we're close to getting a consensus on what bid we're gonna accept or how we're moving forward in that?
Yeah, we have 4 firms submitted proposals. One firm was $20,000 too high. And so we're looking at the 3 firms that were at 50,000 or less, because that's completely paid for with the funds from the Jones Family Foundation.
Okay.
Any other financial questions? All right.
This is kind of after Holly's question, which is great. Attendance zone versus the other. But then going back to our grade level K through 4 or K through 5 scenario, would we be cutting it too close if we went with the grade level centers? Then you pretty much have a given what our class size is going to be. Is it possible we could make that 8 or that 6, 7, 8 middle school work if we go
Right off the bat,
right off the bat?
without
I just want
pushing
to
it
put
off
that out
into
for
next year.
future discussion when you do this other stuff.
Yeah,
And I
that
know
would
you
be-
said there's no room for anything else, so then it comes down to if we have a double class we didn't connect or something like that, could go down there. I'm guessing, I just wanna, you can be real close if you know what your number is in the school, you can divide those students up in those grades to each class, so you shouldn't have a variable, hopefully.
Much more controllable.
Biggest thing would probably be an influx of kindergartners, a lot bigger than you thought, or I can't imagine it being in other grades where all of a sudden it take off, but anything's possible.
Yeah, I just didn't want to interrupt, I didn't want to finish. You finished? Yeah, okay, I'm sorry. I didn't want to,
Thank you.
I didn't raise my hand for you to stop. Anything like that. Shifting gears slightly, talking about this, we can probably talk about the regular board meeting, since we're workshop, we can talk about the topic of the public input on grade configuration. What does the board think about talking at the same time, having people discuss with us busing? I think that ties together what we're doing. Let's hear it both on grade configuration and busing at the same time, so we can get feedback, those that wish to share both with us.
Yeah, and that's my plan, is
Okay.
to talk about transportation, because that's an integral part to the decision-making process for grade configuration.
Well, and school start times then. Those are, I mean, that's a huge thing,
Well,
that's
busing.
tied right into how we configure busing,
Go to 1 tier versus 2 tier.
right?
I'd like to hear that. I think that's just as important.
Yeah.
Yeah, and we can talk about all those options, and we will. I hate to say this, but a 1-tier system would be extremely expensive. So I think it's unlikely. However, we will share our estimates, because really, the board will need to decide that. 2-tier is likely. Which one goes first or second, hopefully will not impact the budget that much. And of course, we have grade configuration discussion.
The other piece of the 1 tier versus 2 tier is, can we find enough bus drivers to run a 1 tier?
Oh, no.
Maybe.
I'm just gonna say no.
Can't say no, you can't say no, we don't know.
Yeah, we don't know, but that's a what if.
I think I'm very interested in 1 tier versus 2 tier. What the cost is, I don't know how many students we have, but I want to hear.
Yeah, and Sarah Houle has rough estimates, and then we'll refine them further, focus on these 2 leading.
They can't put those numbers till we get grade level versus,
I know, I want to hear, I heard pretty clear that 1 tier versus 2 tier last year. Not everybody, but I just think it's, when some buses go to the house 4 times in 1 day, the one stop 4 times in 1 day, does that economic make sense too? No, doesn't sound like to me, but we'll hear.
We're in a busy couple months here.
Once, we are done by the 22nd. Good point.
Weeks, man, weeks, let's get
What do you
moving.
mean, months?
Good point, weeks.
All right. I think that's it for finance then. Was there anything for teaching and learning? For committee? I'm going down the list of the other committee things.
Nothing for tonight.
Okay, operations?
Just kind of an update, we are gonna have a recommendation as far as running track repairs, or I should say, maintenance. And so we'll, Mr. Deere, Ms. Ostendorf and I will talk about when that's gonna happen, and if it's at a workshop or regular meeting. So that's on the horizon. I know Ms. Paris and Mr. Johnson also looked at a lighting retrofit project, so we're making some progress there, but nothing to present to the school board at this time.
Can we at some point get an update as well on whatever happened to the idea of the solar panels and that extra section? I've still not ever heard kind of how that was either played out or resolved, or are they still looking at it?
Sure.
Legislative and policy, so the most exciting committee of all. We have a number of policies that need to be reviewed. There are 9 that have to be reviewed annually, and then we should review the 600 through 900 series plus the 1000, which is one of the annual ones. So I have just sort of divided them up, having us review policies on the second meeting of the month. By doing it that way, we can have between like 7 to 9 policies each month that we'll look at. I tried to break them out in ways where they were sort of all in the same section and not being too many that were super long and that kind of thing. So just pay attention for that.
Just a question, I've never been on the policy, what's it called, policy?
Legislative policy.
Legislative policy committee. But I review policies, so I'm curious what you mean by us reviewing them. Are we gonna go over them, or staff can bring recommended changes? How's that, how are you planning on looking at that done?
So what we had done this past year is we would know that these 7 policies are the ones that we're going to be talking about at the next meeting. We would have the obligation to read through them ourselves, and then to the meeting bring any issues that stood out for us, and then also hear from admin if there were any issues that needed to be changed, or if MSBA had recommended changes to those kinds of things. So most of the time it went pretty quickly to say, like, I mean, most of those policies are pretty boilerplate language, you know, from MSBA and what needs to be legally required in there. So, you know, most of the time it was, yep, looks good, looks good, looks good. But then there were some that, you know, necessitated a little bit more discussion, or things that, you know, we wanted more
I just
information
want to make
about.
sure that staff they weren't doing staff's job.
Right.
We have them to review the policies, us to approve them, review them, but approve them, but they bring the recommendation, okay?
And we did have recommendations come to us ahead of the policy suggesting changes. It wasn't just us review.
Right.
And then presented, or sometimes recommended changes to a policy on the one we were reviewing at that.
And I hope that would come to our board prior to that meeting.
Oh, yeah.
Thank you.
Personnel and negotiations.
We are pleased to announce that we have tentative agreements with our teachers team, as well as our custodians. So we're making good progress. I think we're either there with food service workers or very close to it. And then we have additional contracts to negotiate, including support personnel, which includes secretaries, van drivers, paraprofessionals, as well as the principals group. So we're making good progress with our negotiations.
Thank you.
All right, anybody have anything else?
I have the, community ed updates. You want me to do that now? Or you want me to do it during board meeting?
We'll do that in the board meeting.
Got it. Okay.
All right, it's still not clear if we need to have a motion to, not really, right, when our meeting is over, but the workshop, because it's a different format.
We called the meeting to order. I think we have
We adjourn the workshop.
Yeah.
Right, but
Can we just-
whether we need a vote to adjourn
I
or,
think we do it during the workshop and then. go
Right,
into the
yes.
question.
but whether it has to be a vote is my question. So we can adjourn this meeting at 6:12, and what do you guys think about a 5 or 10?
Done.
10-minute recess, so that would put us back at
I'm gonna do
6:22. All right, this meeting is adjourned until 6:22. Yep.
You're doing a good job taking us real care.
I just don't know if we need to vote to adjourn.
I don't remember for sure on workshops, and I think
Meeting to order. Okay, And we have all board members present except for Ms. Tiff, who's not able to be here today. And we have Superintendent Anderson. We did our Pledge of Allegiance at the beginning of the workshop. Ms. Tower will read our mission statement.
Oh, wait, I don't. The mission of the Red Wing Public Schools is to educate and inspire all students as they realize their full potential and become respectful, responsible, and productive citizens.
All right, so then we are on to our agenda. Does anybody have anything they would like to add or change on the agenda? Okay, then I'm looking for a motion to approve it.
So moved.
Okay.
Okay, so we have a motion to approve the agenda by Pam, second by Ms. Rose, second by Mr. Bryant. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, nay. All right, motion carries. Moving on to our educational plan is in the packet, which is where our mission statement and vision and strategic directions can be found. Next up, we have recognitions and upcoming events. And I know Mr. Dirks has something he wants to share.
Yes, I just want to recognize the passing of a former school board member, Byron Pearson, that passed away on Friday. He was a school board member when I graduated from Red Wing High School. He served on the school board in the late 60s and 1970s, and he was a visionary. He served on the school board during 3 major building projects. He served on the school board during the construction of Twin Bluff, which was in the junior high school. He served on the school board during a large construction addition to the Sunnyside School. But the third major building project, which many people are not aware the Red Wing School District did, was the building of the Red Wing Volchek, which is now Minnesota Southeast Technical College. Red Wing School District built that building, which opened in the fall of 1973, so post-secondary educational opportunities would be available in our community. Without the forward thinking of school board members of that era, including Byron Pearson, Red Wing most likely would not have post-secondary education opportunities as we have today in our community. Byron was an inspiration to me. I talked with him many times. He will be missed.
Well said.
Nice man.
And February is Black History Month, so I want to recognize the work that our schools are doing to include people and stories that haven't always been included. Any other recognitions or events? All right.
I would just say that, excellent school play. Music Man, if you didn't get to see it, I'm sorry, because it was amazing. The students, the props, everything was just well done, and so well deserved kudos to all of you who worked so hard. Thank you, thank you, thank you.
Okay, so then we are up to public comment, and I don't believe we had anyone sign up for public comment, and I did not receive any email public comments. Do you have any?
No.
Okay. So we will move on to our COVID-related topics.
As always, I have information about our latest data, vaccination and testing plans, our learning plan, face covering policy, potential mitigation strategies, and efforts to help ease a lot of the stress that we're all experiencing. So we don't have any recommended changes at this time, but if you have any questions, I'm here to answer them.
Yes?
Are they looking at or doing anything about, the face coverings is an issue that we hear about from time to time. Whatever side of the issue is you're on, I'm not here to debate that at all, but are they looking at that? During any recommendations that come forward from MDH or CDC in regards to masks?
Right now, there aren't any recommended changes. I will say though that with the declining COVID case counts, that I think it's time to start exploring that issue. In particular, I think our current criteria for removing face masks will be very challenging to meet. And so I'm wondering, I'll be talking to the COVID response team to see if we should adjust those numbers.
Yeah, please do. I think, everything needs to be looked at from time to time as things change.
Correct. Yeah. Also, Mr. Bryant, there was you'd asked a question or forwarded a question about when we will allow visitors back into the building. And so we are looking at that. Right now, the plan calls for a time around March 1st. We're hoping we can do it earlier, but then really restrict access. So we are not planning to allow parents to come in and just have lunch with their kids and other kids, because we think that's unnecessary at this time. Hopefully we'll bring it back later this spring or next year, don't get me wrong. However, we have some former teachers who would like to help in classrooms and, some other situations like that where I think it's time to bring them back, hopefully. We want to look at the case numbers coming up, but we want to look at that.
Yeah, that was a parent that was asking about volunteering
Correct.
in the schools. It wasn't a visitor.
Oh, I'm
Actually
sorry. Yeah,
volunteering.
you're right. Yeah, volunteer.
So I was like, what are you talking about?
Mhm.
Visitors. So just a question on top of that. The past, and before COVID, people were allowed to walk through the buildings at night for like exercises. That's taboo, I'm saying. People are not allowing that right now.
I believe you're right.
I don't know, I'm just asking.
Yeah, I guess I don't know.
Oh, sure.
Sure.
Just let us know. I think every now and then
Yeah.
people ask.
I'll talk to Ms. Wetter because she's the one who oversees that. So.
Yeah, it's either yay or nay.
Mhm.
Just a question.
All right, well, we'll look for more information on that in the upcoming meeting. Then it looks like we are up to flight paths. So we have Mick Wendland here who is our flight paths coordinator to talk about how that's been going.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, members of the board, for allowing me to come and speak tonight. Just give kind of a brief update on how things are going. So I'll talk about a couple of new initiatives that they're rolling out this year and some updates on some things that we've been doing, and then happy to take any questions that you might have. So new this year, we've expanded down to the elementary level, so all the way down to kindergarten. So with the work with the Wonders curriculum, we started to add some careers that align with the essential questions that the students are doing week to week. So questions like, how do baby animals move, or how do we learn about cultures from the past? So we're just throwing in some terms for exposure, like cultural anthropologist, or a glazier might be somebody that builds buildings. So just adding some terms, so nothing that they're going to commit to, of course, but just things that relate to the topics that are at hand. So those are in the process of being built and being used. Will be ongoing, hopefully finished up by the end of the year. Also new this year, we launched the pilot of the Flight Path Capstone course. We're renaming that from Adulting 101. So that's the course that the juniors are taking. So that's where juniors are doing a deeper dive into their career interests for after graduation, taking a look at what is the demand for that, what level of education is required for that. And then as they look at that required education, what can they do their senior year, and what are some things that they can do in preparation as they head off. The other half of that class looks a lot at personal finance, so budgeting, exciting things like insurance, taxes, all those fun things. So, but that was some feedback that we've gotten from our alumni in the courses that they had taken here previously. It was the independent living and the personal finance were things that they really felt like they were using across continuing levels of education and across career fields pursued. And so those are things that have been incorporated into that course for all juniors to take. Continuing this year, we're continuing our Flight Paths, Intro to Flight Paths course for all of our 8th grade students. So that again is all students are being exposed to all 16 different career fields, and then some other topics like child labor laws, career acquisition skills, all those kinds of pieces. And in helping with both of those classes, they're taught by other teachers. I come in and will do some guest presentations, but I think the thing that's most exciting for me is just hearing excitements of students getting excited about their future and what classes they want to take. And parents will call and say they've had more conversations about their students' future than they'd ever had before. And some and really those students that get connected and get excited about their future that they hadn't before. So that's been kind of the fun part for me coming out from that. Also, we're continuing with our internships. We're up to 45 students, so this is the largest group that we've had since the pandemic began. We are back at Mayo with the Healthcare Career Exploration course. We have students that are on internships, again, with the Learn and Earn program with Red Wing Ignite and Manufacturing. So a lot of repeat ones, some district involvement in there as well. Some new ones. We have a student that wants to go be a shoe designer, so he's with Red Wing Shoe for that, which is exciting. So yeah, that's kind of a quick update, but I'm happy to answer any questions.
Go ahead, Mr. Bright.
I'm glad you talked about the life experiences, because I told the story of some young persons went to work and after they graduated, and they got their check and said, "Who's this FICA guy taking all my money?" So it's good that you get that, because that's probably something we all just assumed but didn't have the time to teach. So I'm very good. I've heard positive things about that.
Thank you.
You said that 45 students is the most you've had since COVID. What were the numbers like before that? I don't remember off the top of my head.
Pretty similar.
Okay.
Lower 50s, upper 40s. So, and the number represents who is in. So sometimes we have students that have an interest in an area that we can't fill. So like one student who wants to be an aerospace engineer and had room in the schedule, but that's not something that we have to do. We have other students that want to be with like the police department that isn't a great fit. We look for some smaller opportunities, and happy to partner there. So this really kind of represents what our community was able to graciously accept and work with us on. And we had some businesses that just felt, when setting these up in December and January of, this year might not be a great year to bring extra people into the office, and also battling, supply chain issues and their own staffing shortages. So again, I'm super thankful for our community's continued commitment to helping support our students with their interests.
I had a question, and maybe this might be addressed in the next topic. But is there maybe room to grow with the thought of, with these programs, to really highlight getting along with one another? Like, it's not just by exterior diversity, but inside diversity, because from the moment they're middle schoolers until they leave, we're almost like battle royale, and so just, I know we're having a lot of problem right now with that inside, the conflicts, and just really encouraging and setting the environment for them to start learning about each other and like creating meaningful relationships, because they need each other right now. We're going to be gone, all of us are going to be gone someday, and they're going to all that they have left. But the sad reality is, like, I'm burying my peer group right now. And so just maybe highlighting the importance of our peers through programs and like setting environments and encouraging them to learn about one another and how to get along better.
One of the cornerstones with FlightPaths is projecting a lens of equality among career fields and continuing those levels of education. So we're making sure that we're setting a baseline that whatever you're interested in, that has an equal level of excitement and commitment. So I think from the career focus of FlightPaths, that's kind of a cultural piece that we want to embed in there. But I think some of the components you're talking about are really that foundational piece with our social emotional learning that are in there too. So I do get to work with our social emotional learning leads on that, so we do get to collaborate. So I don't know if I'll say it'll be like a cornerstone pull-out piece of FlightPaths, but I think there's a lot that collaboration happening K-12 for there. It's with E12, but the work that's happening at Caldwell.
That component will still be a part of
Social
that.
emotional learning, absolutely, yeah. I think, that buzz phrase has only grown, and I think coming out of the pandemic, I think that's an area that certainly won't be going away anytime soon. Yeah.
Yeah, I got a couple questions on the internship. What grades do you need to be for an internship? Is it senior year, or we got some juniors? And
Mostly seniors. Our collaboration with Red Wing Ignite, they received the Youth Skills Training Grant from the state of Minnesota, and that allows for 16 and 17-year-olds to be on manufacturing sites in agribusiness with collaboration with the Department of Labor to make sure that any Normally hazardous work is approved, so, different types of mills, lathes, they get special permissions in those shops. Otherwise, the majority is senior year, and that really reflects the room in a student's schedule to have that time. So there's a lot more requirements their junior year. By their senior year, most students just need a year of English and a semester of government, and so there's a lot more room in their schedule to afford that time off campus.
Second question, can a student do more than one internship?
So
Do we have any that are? Or?
Yeah. So students, there's a variety. It depends on what the student's interest is, and then also what community collaboration is. So we have some students that are in the schools. They're interested in working with kids. So they don't know if they want to do that in a medical setting or in an education setting. With Learn and Earn, we'll do one semester in the third quarter and one semester in the fourth quarter. I have some students in finance, some that are with Ms. Paradis. They're also going to be at one of our insurance, American Family Insurance in town, and they'll go to Ribbon Credit Union. And so I like to try to get them to different businesses so they can hear different perspectives, different people's life paths, hear their philosophies, and so they can kind of see, especially like in an area like finance, that can be reflected in so many different ways.
It sounds like it's a program that's well received by a number of our students. I was just trying to, if it was only seniors and it was 45 students, I was going to make the comment that that's 25% of our senior classes doing internship, but it's probably not that, but it's still
Pretty close.
a sizable number of our students are involved in internships. So I'm just very proud that our district is doing and very thankful that you're involved with it. So thank you.
Yeah, my pleasure.
Yeah, if I could echo what Mr. Gibb said, you are the perfect fit for this program because of your connections with students and community businesses. And just a reminder that, the program is a result of educational planning that was accomplished about 5 years ago, led to an operating levy, a referendum that was passed by voters. And so because of the voter commitment, we're able to provide these internships to our kids and a lot of other programming regarding the career interest. So thank you for your help with that.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you very much. It's always interesting to hear about like that.
Yeah.
So thank you for being here.
Thank you.
All right. Next up, Nikki Larson is going to share information about the REACH program and summer school for the high school.
Good evening.
And before you start, you might want to just explain kind of your title and your overall role just before you jump into this.
Absolutely. I'm Nikki Larson. I'm by trade business and marketing teacher. I've kind of changed roles. This year I'm now the REACH coordinator, but I've been doing our credit recovery program since 2014, I think. So I do the night school during the school year and then the summer school during the summers. And then with REACH, I've kind of transitioned into that role. And it's been a year. It's very fun. It was a perfect time because it was a good change, something to reignite that fire. So I'm just here to talk just a little bit about what we're doing in REACH, where we have a couple of new strategies and pilots that we're trying just to better serve our kids and give them what they need. So first, just what REACH is. REACH is a program that started in Hutchinson, Minnesota. They have a great program. It's all over the state. There's a couple in Illinois and a couple in South Dakota. But the mission of REACH is to make meaningful connections with our students who actually need that support. So they need an extra adult in their life. They need that social emotional connection. And then also focusing on the whole student to help them become the best person that they have. So REACH actually stands for relationships, education, accountability, character, and hard work. With COVID and the different learning styles of our students and whether they were hybrid or they were in person, we had to look at a way this year to kind of meet the needs to make sure that we're connecting with all of our kids. So thankfully, we were able to add 2 sections of REACH. I only had 3 sections per semester. This semester, we are able to have 5 sections of actual REACH where we cover all 5 topics. And then there was a need of, we needed to do a little bit more. So we kind of spiraled off and did a pilot called REACH Success Lab, in which we focus on the education, the accountability, and the hard work. So the Success Lab has 4 sections of it, and we try to keep our numbers low so that those connections can be made, and we're actually taking the time to meet with the students, figure out what they need, and how, as a teacher, we can best meet those needs. So our Success Lab is night school is not always feasible for families, whether it's transportation, whether it's time, whether it's other commitments. And as much as we want to make sure academics are a priority, sometimes that just doesn't happen with outside of the school day. So the Success Lab is a pilot program that's a structured time during their schedule during the school day. They have the opportunity to work on their Edgenuity credit recovery classes so they can earn back the credits that they are deficient on so that they can get back on track for graduation on time. So one of the biggest things that we do in there so that it is structured and the kids are getting the most out of it is that they set weekly goals. So on Mondays, they come in and we talk about SMART goals, and it has to be realistic. What do you want to accomplish by the end of the week? And by doing that, we're teaching them organization, we're teaching them, a checklist and holding themselves accountable. At the end of the week, they sit with their teacher, go through what did I do, what didn't I do, what were my obstacles, what were my roadblocks, and then we also celebrate the successes that they do have. So that's a huge part of it. So far, we're week 3 into it. It seems to be working well. We've recovered quite a bit of credits, which is huge. That we want these kiddos to graduate on time. And I mean, to be honest, some of them were overwhelmed with the number of classes that they had to make up. So this is a way to kind of alleviate that pressure, let them take a step back and say, hey, you know what, I can do this. And we're going forward. Another strategy that we're doing, Mitch Skeen is our Prairie Island liaison, and we always run into troubles in the summer with transportation issues. Hiawatha is great. They work very, very well with us. We provide tokens for the students, but they don't go beyond Burnside. So Mitch came to me and we talked to Brian Cashman and we worked it out with MDE. We are going to have an off-site location for summer school this year for our Native American students down at Prairie Island Community Center. It will structure the exact same way we structure up here. We'll have 2 licensed teachers down there with Mitch and with Phil. And so again, we're just piloting, trying to feel things out, how we can best meet the needs of our kids, because at the end of the day, they need to be successful. We want to give them the support that they need and that they deserve. So we're working through it.
Are you done?
Yeah, I'm done. I'm sorry. I just said.
I'm very pleased to hear about the second location on Prairie Island. I think that's wonderful, and too bad the bus doesn't go out that way, but anyway, it doesn't. So get the report back, let us know how next fall, how that went, because I think that's a great step on this. I'll just commend you on the acronyms for REACH. I really like them.
Thank you. Yeah.
Very nice.
I wish I could take credit for it. But I'll promote it up here.
I didn't know you would, until I read it, what REACH.
Yep.
5 very good words that mean they come up on the topic of REACH. So thank you.
You're welcome.
Ms. Howard?
How many kids do you currently have in REACH?
Right now I have 78 students that are in the REACH class between Richard Kemper and myself. And then we have 58 kids that are in the Success Lab.
Are those 58 different than the 78?
Yep, and I have 26 that are in both. Those are the students that we felt were our frequent, that we just needed a little bit more.
Couple touches.
Yep, and then also Ms. Buck, to touch on the relationship part, we are going to start doing a REACH advisory program. So during advisory, 2 times a month, we're going to take our REACH kids and we're going to do things like team building, personal experiences, and share that, just kind of like the classroom bonding part of it. So they can get to learn, because you walk into my class and there's kids from every different walks of life that have to function within that classroom. So the counselors, youth outreach, and our social workers are working together, trying to put that together as well. And hopefully we can sustain that over the next couple of years.
And when I first got on the board, REACH came on with Mr. Nemenich.
Correct.
Kind of brought it in and it's morphed into what you're doing now, which is fantastic. It sounds like it's a lot more.
Mm-hmm.
What are the age groups again? Is it
right now it's 9 through 12. There are some schools in the state that start this in 5th grade. So when they come up, they kind of understand this is, okay, we're doing our weekend check-in. They know what to expect. Right now, some of the kids that come in are kind of like, oh, this is very weird to me. And the relationships now are forming more organically, which I think is even better than trying to force the relationships that I have with the kids and with how they have them with each other. Just because it is new, hopefully we can start integrating it into the younger level so that when they get up to the high school, it's like second nature. This is what I need to do, and this is where we're going with it.
There was, yeah, okay, so you're thinking 8, 7.
I would love to have 7, 8 as like an introductory, and then they transition, because a lot changes between an 8th and 9th. And when we talk about credit recovery, our highest numbers of students that need to take summer school are our 9th graders, because it hasn't clicked yet. They don't get that, okay, these classes count now. We need the credits. I need to graduate. I can't just, whatnot. So, that transition year of 8th and 9th grade is huge. So I would love to see it in the 7th and 8th grade.
Awesome. And there was some talk about this being completely separate from special education. Are you seeing a crossover or?
Yep, absolutely. We work with the case managers to determine whether or not it's a good fit for the REACH program. I'd say probably a little less. I mean, there's not a ton overlap, but there's about a third of students that I have that are on IEPs.
Okay.
And we work, like I said, we work with the case managers to figure out whether this is the best fit or not, or if a trans studies class would work better. It's all student-based, student need-based.
Constant communication.
Constant.
Okay. Anything you would like further for the REACH program besides going 7th and 8th grade? Any more wants or wishes?
No, I really do appreciate that we were able to hire and add those 2 sections. That makes a huge difference from when I had 24 in my classes last semester, and now I'm down to 15, 16. I think my highest one is 20, and that's high, but at least it's more manageable, because I always felt like I have some kids that are in there that aren't as needy as others, and I always felt that I was not getting my attention enough. And so I think Richard Kemper and I have a good number of groups, so I really do appreciate that we were able to do that.
And by the way, that was because of school board action.
Yes.
Taken to hire the additional 4 teachers.
Yep.
We were only able to hire 2, but one of them was able to be assigned to the REACH program.
Yes.
So it worked out.
Very appreciative.
Right.
What else would be necessary to make it go to 7th and 8th? Is it a capacity, finance? Like, what are the hurdles between now and to make it?
Establishing the program. I think that REACH has been around for 3 years, but I still think that the student body, the community in general doesn't really understand what it is. And sometimes the parents don't necessarily know. So it'd be working with those 7th and 8th grade teachers and seeing where are our needs, what can we do. But I think it's mostly just trying to get that program established so they know what to expect, and just kind of introducing it into there. And then again, it depends on enrollment and staffing and whatnot, obviously. But I think it's more or less like I said, it's my first year. I'm trying to get my feet wet a little bit and try to get the program underneath my feet and then expand from there. Sometimes I like to get ahead of myself. I need to step back.
I think that's a good answer, actually, is to show families and the community the benefits of the program. And I know they're there, so it's, part of tonight is explaining that to a larger audience. And then, of course, it always comes down to money. Because the REACH program was made possible. I know I'm going to sound like a broken record, but it was made possible because of the operating levy.
Yes.
So we want to continue that in the future, but then, if we can possibly expand it, it's definitely worthwhile.
And I'd love to see it where I'm not explaining the benefits. I would love my students to be up there saying, this is what it's done for me. This is what the benefits are, because hearing it from a peer is a lot different than hearing it from an adult.
Really quickly, the 6th grade pathways that we do, is that connected, or could that be?
And that's what we've discussed. It isn't right now. It's not connected right now, but that is a potential that we have that program already established and in place. So that's something that could be easily, worked with.
Okay, is pathways just 6th grade?
6th and 7th grade. 6th and 7th grade, yes.
So that's a great question,
Yeah.
because that could be one way where we could grade funding.
Yeah, and kind of connect it to philosophy.
Absolutely, yeah.
Okay, cool.
Anything else?
Nice job, Ms. Larson.
Thank you, and thank you for letting me share my
I
kiddos.
was wondering what was going on.
Oh, good, happy?
Okay, we are up to school board reports. Ms. Rowe, do you want to share about negotiation? Or I guess maybe there's not much to share beyond what we talked about in the workshop, but
Nope, I would just say that we've got a tentative agreement with the teachers and the custodians. We're working with the cooks, getting closer there, and then principals and support personnel will begin shortly.
okay, so from board liaisons, Ms. Tower, I know you had things from GCED, correct?
Yes, I've got a whole bunch of good things from GCD. Are you ready, Jim?
I am. On the edge of my
Make sure
chair.
you're awake.
Edge of my chair, here, pins and needles.
All right. Well, the first thing I wanted to share with everybody is the amount of people on this community ed board. I did not know that this board was this packed with people. Did you know? I'm gonna tell
I
you.
was on it. I
Were you?
was a policeman.
So you kind of know.
Advisory group.
So, Katie Hartman from Southeast Tech, Tanya, who works at Community Ed, Dawn Wettern, Mark Ryan is the board kind of chair who used to be on our board. Daryl Mark, Don Laffey, Don Lummel, Kathy Olson, Paul Hildebrandt, Ann, who works for Redmond Public Schools, Michaela and Aaron, who are the rec coordinator and the community ed coordinator, Joe Rabard, who just secured hundreds of thousands of dollars for Redmond Public Schools, Amy Smith from the library, Marie Nelson from United Way, and Levon Lummel. So all of those people came a couple weeks ago, and we had a really, really fruitful conversation about the amount of work that goes on in the community outside of E12 and how much an impact that has on voters and on the referendum as we move forward, because so many people do participate in community ed, and they don't always make the connection that the money that we're, seeking in a referendum comes back to the school district and provides these programs. We talked about the new catalog that's out. Has everybody gotten theirs? Did you sign up for pottery, anyone?
I think it was full.
Okay, I'm just checking. But, just there's a lot of things in the catalog that people can do. And we went through that a little bit, and then there's a puzzle thing that's going on right now that they've developed. Has anybody heard about the Puzzle Club, or it's this puzzle challenge? Very cool. And a little bit, we have some openings at Colville. So if anybody wants to register their children at Colville, we still have openings there for the 22-23 year. There's little take-home packets that they can bring in. And I think one of the biggest highlights of it was talking about Jill Rivard, who's the director of the Hiawatha Valley Adult Education. And two really cool things that came out of that was in 2021, we had 6 residents of Goodhue County graduate with their GED. And then we had 6 graduates go back and actually get their high school diploma, which is different than getting the GED. And so there's all kinds of programming available for people if they want to go back in that route. Some kids go to learning centers, or they go to Tower View, and they try to work it out that way. But if it doesn't work, what do? They can always call community ed, so tell families. So I'm just telling that to everybody out there. And we have tons of programming in the Hiawatha Valley adult education programs. Jill is working pretty closely with Katie Morum over at Southeast Tech to get some stuff going. Well, they've got stuff going, but to get more people there. And that's, of course, with that $400,000 worth of grants that Jill secured for us. And there's synchronized classes for people that want to get back into a career after they've got there. They don't have to go into a school to do it. They can go to Jill Rivard and sign up online for classes just to get their foot in the door if they're not able to have transportation. I don't know if computers were secured for them. I didn't ask that. Over the spring break, the pool will be open for the community. And I can't think of any, there's lots of classes. Does anybody have any questions? I might not know the answers. If you do, call Dawn Wettern or anybody over at Community Ed. I'm just so proud of them. Everybody was really engaged, and like I said, 60% of the people in Red Wing don't have kids in school. But we know that our seniors use the programming. A lot of people go get their driver's classes again and get money off of their insurance and go on little field trips, and I'm gonna sign my mom up, she doesn't know that yet, okay.
I've used it, I did the 55 Alive for refresher in, November, no, December.
December, okay.
So
And does it last for a year?
this is 3 years, refresher. You do the 55 Alive, once you turn 55, you have to take an 8-hour, 2 4s, and then every 3 years you do 4, and they run it through, committee ed.
And so, the one thing that sometimes stops people is cost. Oh, I can't afford the $45 or the $55 or whatever. There's scholarships always, which I think it's important for people to know that, like, if I don't have that extra money right now this month, you can call the office and somebody will discreetly set you up with a scholarship if that's what you want for your child or your family member. All right. Ooh. And Nick and Heather worked really hard to get the lights at Mississippi National. So that's awesome too, for the cross-country skiing.
Will they be up on the 12th?
Are they up throughout this winter? Or do they just go up sometimes?
I assume they're up throughout.
Should have asked him when he was here.
Oh,
Maybe just know.
Just those.
They are all up. The electric work is being done pro bono, so it's a little bit slower to get that done at this point because they're doing their own work and catching up on COVID interruptions. But so he's hoping, but they're ready, but they're just not all lit yet.
Okay. It'd be nice to see, because they, Friends of Us are having a snowshoe hike. They did it last year, and
They were hoping that they could put the.
you put it together by then, so. Oh, well, something to look forward to, if it doesn't happen, something to look forward to next year.
Yeah, I mean, just so many things that come out of community ed, and they're working so hard. It's in conjunction, nonstop.
My thing, it sounds like, like a lot of good work is being done. A lot of the same issues is how do we reach people? How do we get out? I like how everybody's kind of banding together to do that, because I think the more that the community sees us work together, the more that they're inclined to, oh, what is Nikki and Holly doing?
Yeah.
I don't do what they do.
Well, I'm gonna take the YouTube class if you wanna take it with.
Well, I'm doing the snowshoe hiking if you want to do that with me.
Sounds like a trade right there.
I'm not, I'm kind of versed in winter, but anyways. Paul, community ed, if you have any questions?
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, do we have any more reports, liaison reports?
I reached out to get one from GCED because I had COVID that week,
Yep,
so I wasn't able to make it, but I haven't gotten word back.
it is in the packet. There's a,
Little word.
yep,
How big is
Chair
the word?
Johnson submits kind of talking points, the area superintendents, and so I just copied and pasted those talking points into the school board report.
Oh, perfect. Is it long? No. No? I was just waiting for my email from her. So I didn't go down that far, but, I know we get them from the past, like from our meetings in the past. She submits them, so I don't know.
this was from 1/26. So
So just a couple weeks ago, yep. Oh my gosh, I was thinking I needed one for February. It's okay, I have COVID brain. It's okay. It's okay.
for student school board, I sat in the cafeteria during all of the lunch periods today, which is quite an experience. You should all do that. And gave out information about student school board, so hopefully we will have some numbers soon. Working on that. Any other school board reports? If not, we are up to administrative.
There are numerous topics included. I'll just highlight 4 of them. First of all, substitutes. We still need substitutes for teachers, paras, custodians, and food service workers. We had a slight dip in the number of unfilled absences on some days, so that's good, but then other days it goes back up again, so we do need substitutes. You can see the substitute fill rates for January 25th through the 28th. I'll try to include that with every month's or every meeting's report, just to give you an idea of where we are. Great news on hiring custodians and hopefully food service workers. We've had vacant positions all year. We've been constantly short, but we've had recent inquiries from numerous people. We've hired enough custodians. We actually have a full crew, or very close to a full crew for the first time in quite a while. We also have some leads on cooks. I think the biggest reason is that Amy French and Jackie Paradis came up with a suggestion to use a paid subscription to Indeed. We've been advertising on Indeed for quite some time, but the paid subscription really enables us to reach more people. And so, you know, literally we see job applicants coming in much more frequently. So we'll see what happens, but we're cautiously optimistic there. I listed different activities during teacher and paraprofessional professional development day here in January. And so you see the list for the teachers as well as the paraprofessionals. I will say they were high quality professional development. There's a lot of it. And I know our teachers and paras, you know, are stressed just like everybody else throughout the community. But I've heard a lot of positive comments about what they learned that day and as far as looking forward to next steps. And then finally, on the last page of my report, I did give a quick staffing update showing where we are in each department. And that's all I have unless you have some questions.
Anyone have questions?
No, but I really like the staffing update.
Yeah, Ms. Ostendorf, I think, suggested that, or perhaps one of the board members suggested that, so we'll try to include that. And of course, it changes on a daily basis.
Right.
But at least on a particular day, we can give you a glimpse as far as where we are.
Did you want to speak a little bit more about the youth outreach grant?
Oh, yes, thank you.
Yeah.
Youth Outreach submitted a grant request for a program called the Ignite program, and they did receive that particular grant. They're working with our principals to see how it could be used, especially at the elementary levels. But a lot of that planning is still in flux. You know, they're still trying to make arrangements. And so my thinking is that we'd love to have maybe Arden come to a board meeting and talk about, you know, their hopes and dreams for the grant. So they did receive the grant, and they're working on ways on how to spend that money to best serve our kids.
How much money was it?
Oh, I was told, but I don't recall offhand.
$1 million?
Wasn't that much,
Okay.
but it was a sizable grant, you know, that can last over multiple years.
Oh, nice. Way to go.
So I'll talk to Mr. Davis and Ms. Ostendorf about inviting her to one of our upcoming sessions.
All right. Then I think if there are no other questions, we are on to our consent agenda. Does anybody have anything that they would like to pull from the consent agenda? Mr. Bryant?
I'd like to pull the workshop meeting on July 18th and the board meeting on the 18th. Minutes.
Okay. Okay. Is there anything else? So if not, I'm looking for a motion to approve the consent agenda minus the minutes for both the workshop and meeting.
So moved.
I'll second.
Who's second? Okay, thank you. Okay, so we have a motion to approve the consent agenda by Mr. Bryant, second by Ms. Howard, with the exception of the minutes. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those in favor, nay. And motion carries. Okay, so minutes.
I don't have anything. I was not present, so I can't vote on them, so I can abstain.
Gotcha.
So,
Okay, does anybody have anything else they would like to bring up about the minutes? If not, I'm looking for a motion to approve them.
So moved.
I'll second it, I just, nobody else.
All right, so we have a motion to approve the minutes from the workshop and meeting on the 26th, correct? Motion made by Ms. Tower, second by Mr. Dirks. All those in favor say aye. All opposed say nay.
I'll abstain.
Oh, and abstain, Mr. Bryant. All right, so that carries as well. Okay, then we are up to donations and grants.
I'd like to publicly thank several people for their donations to the Emergency Medical Needs Fund. Neil and Kim Newman, Red Wings Lions Club, Heather Nagel and Edward Ward, and Dave and Gretchen Anderson. So thank you for those donations.
I'm just curious if there was something that prompted this?
Yeah.
Since there were a number for the same thing?
Yes, but I'd like to defer to Ms. Gorman to explain the processes that she follows. I don't know the specifics.
Okay.
But I can find out what you know.
Just curious.
I make a motion to adopt the resolution. of the grants.
We have a second?
Second.
Okay, and because this is a resolution, we will do a roll call vote. So we have a motion to accept the resolution by Mr. Bryant, second by Ms. Rowe. Ms. Rowe?
Aye.
Ms. Tower?
Aye.
Ms. Tiff is absent. Mr. Bryant?
Aye.
Ms. Buck?
Aye.
Mr. Deere?
Aye.
And Chair votes aye, so that passes as well. And thank you again to those donors. Okay, then I believe we are up to our business items. And first up is the Dakota Language and Culture Program. So are you presenting about this, or is Ms. Whitcomb?
You know, I'll give the presentation. Ms. Whitcomb is here to answer some questions that may arise.
Great.
But for many years now, the school district has been interested in starting a Dakota Language and Culture Program within the school district. There have been some barriers along the way, especially with regard to licensure of a potential teaching candidate, funding, and sustainability of the program. Could we make it last for many years instead of just a one-year program? So we have not been able to do that in the past, even though it's been probably the highest priority for the American Indian Parent Advisory Committee. Ever since I've been working with the group, that's always been the number one issue or concern or suggestion that they have for the school district. Well, the tribal council and the current advisory committee really put the puzzle pieces together just recently. And so we're really excited to offer this addition to our program of studies. The plan is that Prairie Island has already hired a teacher, a licensed teacher in Minnesota that would enable him to teach these particular courses. I know Ms. Whitcomb has talked to him on the phone, and he's an outstanding candidate. So he's been hired by the Prairie Island Indian community. The thinking is that he would spend 1 or 2 periods a day, depending on student interest in the classes that would be offered, and that the school district would reimburse Prairie Island or pay back Prairie Island for his time in the school district teaching Dakota language and culture courses. The estimated cost for personnel would be somewhere between $30,000 and $50,000 per year if you taught 2 periods the whole year. So I think it's a reasonable cost. It addresses our previous concerns in the following ways. First of all, he's licensed. I can't describe how happy I was when Ms. Whitcomb and I double checked to see if this particular person was licensed. And his name came up with the right license. It was a really great moment because really that is the toughest part. There are very few people who are fluent in the Dakota language. Prairie Island found somebody, I think from St. Paul, to join Prairie Island. So he's well-trained and he'll be very educated. So that took care of the first barrier. The funding, at least my perspective or the school's perspective has been, how can we justify hiring a full-time person if we don't know how many kids will be in classes from year to year? So it could be a very expensive proposition for us with very few kids enrolled. Well, Prairie Island took care of that because they've hired someone and they will be using him full-time, presumably throughout, the 12 months during the year. And so we're able to use his work or his expertise during the specific times that we need him. And so that really lowers the cost for us and makes it really exciting. And then sustainability, again, this person is hired by Prairie Island, and so we're confident that he will be able to stay working with Prairie Island and the school district for years to come. There's never a guarantee, but because he has a full-time job here, we're much more confident it can happen.
Ms. Rowe?
Just a couple of things then. So benefits, we don't have to worry about that.
Correct.
Okay. And then is there some sort of, who's like the supervisor then? Is it who evaluates, like as with, when we hire a teacher, we are the evaluators and provide feedback. How does that happen for this person?
It would be done, that's a good question, because we need to have that figured out. It would be done similar to how we work with employees hired through the Goodhue County Education District. So they're officially employed by GCED, but they work in our school. And so as a result of that, we split those evaluation responsibilities and sometimes do them jointly. In this case, the person would be directly supervised not only by Prairie Island, but also by the high school principal.
Awesome. And then
or assistant principal, in terms of doing evaluations.
So then is there a contract that's with expectations that are just all lined up then so that everyone knows who's doing what and that person is well supported? Because the last thing I want is to have somebody come in here and they're the right fit and they're doing the right thing and this is what we've wanted and the parent advisory council has wanted, but this person's not getting the kind of support that they need or the welcome that they deserve.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, with GCD, we have kind of an agreement that was created many years ago, as well established. In this case, I envision an agreement between Prairie Island and the school district, outlining exactly what you said. Who does what, the cost, expectations moving forward. Can someone withdraw? When does that happen? Some of those details. Yeah, that's a really important piece.
Great. I'm super excited about this.
And I would assume that agreement would come through, the school board for approval.
Okay.
And so, but, obviously I wanted to get kind of an endorsement of the plan so that we can move to that next stage, and then we'll figure out the details and bring it to a future meeting.
Awesome. Thank you for the work on this.
Yeah, and one thing that I do want to point out, there's a description of the Dakota language and culture course description. Could be multiple levels, like a level 1 or level 2. We try to keep it general. And so the recommendation tonight is to, see if I can read it, to amend the Reading High School grades 9 through 12 program of studies to include Dakota language and culture, and then also to authorize me to make the final arrangements for implementing Dakota language and culture courses beginning this coming school year. Certainly you can add to that if you want to say, that final agreement needs to go through the school board, or, at least there's an understanding that will happen. But that's the motion we need tonight, and then hopefully that gets approved, and then we can move forward finalizing the details. But we're really excited about it. It's a great deal.
Mm-hmm.
Can I just say something before we?
I don't have to work as hard anymore. Like if this was available for me, I wouldn't have chased my culture, my traditions, and language down. This is a huge victory, not only just for Indian people, because these ways benefit everyone. And I'm just so excited that we will be able to offer that to others too, that, you know, may not have learned from the traditional settings and ways of life, that they don't feel alone anymore and that they feel like they belong somewhere. You know, this is really good, but essentially I'm glad I don't have to work as hard to get these kids to keep their language and culture. So Nina Wopida, to everyone involved for this.
If we're gonna dream, let's really think about how we can expand this into middle school or, you know,
Yeah, that
what
was-
other kind of great ideas can we do?
Yeah, Ms. Whitcomb, you know, right after we looked at the teacher licensure, kind of verified that. Right away, she was saying, well, can we do it here? Can we do this? I know a chef someplace, and I know, you know, Paul Dressen was talking about learning, you know, history through the Dakota perspective. You know, all sorts of possibilities are on the horizon.
Right.
But the first step is language.
Yeah, and that's Brother Barry, and we learned from the same teacher, so he's good. He's amazing, so I'm pretty excited.
Mr. Bryant?
Thank you. This is very nice. I'm excited to see how this takes off. You just talked about, I think you answered my question. The person will be at the high school then? Will actually be
Yes.
at the high school. They didn't really say in the report where the person in the class will be. And then only 2 classes a day, so there's a chance to expand that? So like you said, the middle school?
Yeah, and the person won't be here in the high school full-time.
Right.
Just during the teaching parts. However, there are other possibilities. I know Don Leonard has talked about some possibilities, and, you know, I think he has a really good background, so he could really help us in numerous ways. So, but yeah, he'll be a teacher at the high school, and, you know, a lot of his time will be in the community at Prairie.
Right.
What was the second question, Mr. Bennett?
About going, I think you brought it up, I think Pam brought it up about expanding it to the younger 7th graders or 4th graders. I'm just throwing that or something. So I think the opportunity is probably greater than what we're sitting here imagining right now, so.
Yeah, definitely. And of course, we'd want to work with Mr. Dressen, Prairie Island, and Tribal Council to see what works for everyone. But yes, there is that potential.
Awesome.
This is wonderful. So I'm looking for a motion to amend the program of studies.
So moved. Second.
Okay. So we have a motion to amend the program of studies to include Dakota language and culture and to authorize superintendent to finalize arrangements for implementing Dakota language and culture courses beginning 22-23. By Ms. Buck, second by Ms. Tower. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, nay.
Thank you.
Thank you for everybody that worked on that. All right, we are up to our pay equity report.
Yeah, Ms. French had another commitment tonight, so she's not able to attend. So I'll present it briefly. We do have Bob Bjorklund on the call, in case you're wondering who Robert Bjorklund is. And he's the one who really reviewed the data and submitted the report to the state. So if there's some questions that you have that I'm not able to answer, then Mr. Bjorklund will jump in. So thank you, Mr. Bjorklund, for joining us tonight. State law requires all public institutions, such as cities, counties, and school districts to submit reports called pay equity compliance reports to the state. that are intended to eliminate any gender-based wage inequities in compensation. That's the purpose. We have to do it once every 3 years. For a while, I think one cycle, it was once every 5 years, but now they've gone back to once every 3 years. Amy French did compile the data that she shared with Mr. Bjorklund, who serves as a consultant for the district. He helps us with position descriptions, with the job ratings for those positions, and also pay equity from time to time. We did have I want to be forthright, we did submit a report prior to the deadline date of January 31st. However, it does need board approval, so I contacted the state, the pay equity coordinator, just to make sure, that our arrangements would work out this way. And so she was fine with us securing a board approval on February 7th. So you can see the report document there. The cover page has to do with the compliance report. So this data is analyzed with multiple tests to determine that we are not being discriminatory with regard to gender classification. By the way, a lot of entities are found to be not in compliance, and then they need to change some structures in order to be in compliance. And I've had personal experience many years ago with a business manager who was rated too low, and it wasn't obvious. When you just looked at the wages, it didn't make sense. But then when I got this report 20 years ago, you could see a line, and all of a sudden there was a dip, a huge dip, because of the business manager pay. And as a result of that, we increased her pay, so it was more in line. And it was kind of a reminder to me that we have to take this data seriously. It's not a perfect report, but it can make a difference in terms of pay equity. So there are multiple tests that we need to go through, and we need to pass each test. Certainly, if you have statistical questions, Mr. Bjorklund can respond to that. And then the last few pages are the actual job titles that we have in the district, how many males we have as of, I believe, December 31st, how many females, and then the job type. So if there's a certain percentage of people in that particular position that are female, then it's called a female-dominated classes. If there's a certain percentage that are male, then it's a male-dominated class. And if it's somewhere in between those two numbers, then it's called a balanced class. You see the job points, maximum monthly salary, which include benefits, most benefits, the predicted pay based on the regression line as you chart those particular positions, and then pay difference. So it goes into the statistical analysis program that the state has, and that's how we get our particular compliance report numbers. So I'm certainly not an expert with regard to pay equity or these particular statistical analysis, but if you have any questions, I'll do my best to answer, and Mr. Bjorklund is here as well.
Yeah, I have a number of things. First, I want to make sure I'm understanding this predicted pay report where you listed the job points, maximum monthly salary, predicted pay difference. And if I'm understanding this right, the maximum monthly salary would be what an employee would work if they work 40 hours a week and their benefits all combined on the high end of the pay scale, if I'm understanding that right. So, and that also 12 months a year, is that correct? Putting that all together. Instead of saying hourly rate, you got to do a lot of math in there to try to understand how it kind of works, but it makes sense to me if I'm understanding it right. Is that right?
Mr. Bjorklund, if you can just confirm that.
And you're muted.
Oh, you're muted, Bob.
I think maybe you were trying to jump in earlier too, but. There you go.
Can you hear me now?
Perfect.
Thank you.
If you're talking about the predicted pay report, the predicted pay column is really a statistical artifact of the regression line. The maximum monthly salary assumes that all of our employees, whether they're part-time or full-time, reflects full-time maximum pay with the addition of monthly health contribution added to the maximum pay rate that you see here. Okay? The only thing you need this pay, the only relevance of this report, predicted pay report, is it allows us to count the number of males that fall above and below the predicted male pay line. And it allows us to count the number of females that fall above and below the predicted male pay line. You can't use this particular report to make decisions with respect to pay. It's only used to test the parameters of the Minnesota Pay Equity Act. That's really the sole purpose of this particular report.
Okay, so you're saying when I see a negative pay difference, that's not anything to be alarmed about, that we might be underpaying somebody?
No, the negative, the pay difference when it's negative indicates jobs that are falling below the predicted pay line for male jobs only. And again, by definition, if we're talking about a male job, the calculation of the male pay line really tries to best describe the variance or differences in pay across male jobs only. So almost by definition, you would expect many of the jobs that are male to fall above that line and a fairly similar amount falling below that line, because the line is really an average, a calculation of the average difference across those male pay rates. The issue is more where our female jobs, because they don't go into the analysis of the pay line, it allows us to judge how many of our female jobs are falling below that predicted value.
Okay, well, I appreciate what's here. I'm just trying to see if I'm understanding. I'm looking at job points. I get that that's assigning a value to the type of job, but it seems to me I see a number of positions under with the job points of 500 and lower that are negative numbers, and that, if I'm thinking that right, it seems to me we might be having an issue keeping up with the pay in that end. Am I looking at that right?
Not necessarily. If you look at the graph, do you have a copy of the graph in that report?
No, we don't have a copy of the graph. I'm sorry, Bob.
Okay, well, the graph, if you look at the graph, you really see the distribution of jobs in terms of the pay line, male pay line, and the number that fall above and below it. But what's really more important, really, is that if you go to the compliance report, based upon all the pay information that's input, we have to pass 3 tests. The first test is that statistical analysis test, okay? That's where it judges the proportion of male jobs that fall below that line in relation to the proportion of female jobs that fall below that line. And in order to pass the state's test, we need a score of 80% or better. We passed with a score of 180%. So we're looking very good in that respect. In terms of the salary range test, it examines how long it takes people to move through the steps in the salary range and the number of steps in that salary range. And again, what's trying to judge whether on average males get through the salary range quicker than females, okay? Or in other words, do males have like 4 steps in their salary range and females have 10 steps in their salary range? And again, it's that proportion of those, the average number of years it takes or steps for male jobs compared to females. And again, we have to pass with a score of 80% or better. And here we're okay. We passed with a score of 87%, but there are some issues. And again, those issues are primarily a result of the teacher salary schedule that's has a number of lanes, number of steps, that's significantly more steps than other jobs. And most of our female dominated job classes are in a teacher bargaining unit. So that kind of negatively impacts us, but we still pass on the salary range test. And then the exceptional services pay test examines the proportion of male jobs that may be receiving longevity or performance pay over the maximum of the salary range compared to the number of female jobs that are receiving pay over their salary range maximum due to longevity and or performance. And again, it's that proportion that they test. And again, we need a score of 80% or better. And again, we pass with 111%. So actually our compensation program is good. If we're talking about whether jobs are underpaid or overpaid, that's really a market-driven issue that's unrelated to pay equity here. That's a separate consideration that the district, takes into account in the collective bargaining process and the pay setting process.
I'm not disputing the final result when we're done, but I'm just reading this and I think I see an awful lot of negative numbers that concern me on the final pay difference. And what I'm hearing from you is what you're saying, I shouldn't be concerned about that.
You shouldn't be concerned at all about that. There's always going to be negative. It's the preponderance of negatives to positive, male versus female, that you have to worry about, at least in terms of the Minnesota Pay Equity Act.
I think that's the key phrase in terms of Pay Equity Act.
Yeah.
Now, I'm sure we're passing the test on that form. I just don't know if we're passing the test on the other part.
Well, I know there's a tendency on the part of bargaining units to look at that predicted pay report. And when it looks at it and it says one of their members is $800 a month below the predicted value, they think that's an indication that they should ask for more money in collective bargaining. But that's not what the purpose of this report is, and that's really not what it's saying. And I know that creates a lot of confusion, but the only value in that predicted pay report whatsoever is to assess compliance. That's its only purpose.
Okay, thank you for the clarifications.
Any other? Yes, Mr. Bryant?
Thank you. Bjorklund, when did it, Mr. Anderson, maybe he knows too, used to be 5 years, then 3, or back to 5. When did they change it from 5 to 3 years?
When did they do that?
Yes.
Oh gosh, probably
2016?
Probably 9 or 10 years ago.
Okay.
Yeah, I can remember when my other board I was on, it was 5 years then, so, okay, thank you.
Yeah, it went from 3 years to 5 years and then back to 3.
Maybe they went to 5 years.
They're supposed to notify you prior to compliance, although I've had a number of clients that didn't receive notification and then they were taken by surprise that they had a month to submit their pay equity report. But they're supposed to notify you significantly ahead of time so you can put together the materials and report for them.
Thank you.
We do use some of this in negotiations as well. For example, the software that the state has, you can actually enter drafts. So you can see if we're suddenly settling with custodians for significantly higher amounts, does that change the pay equity compliance report in a future year? So we do use that from time to time to see the impact of lowering how many steps we have or significantly increasing the particular bargaining group's wage or benefits.
Yeah, moving forward, the biggest concern that I have regarding the pay equity report is simply we need to be very careful when we go through collective bargaining for our male-dominated jobs to resist the tendency of reducing the number of steps, because we're kind of on the border right now on the salary range test, and anytime we start adjusting and lowering the number of steps in a range for male-dominated jobs, we could find ourselves in a position where we go from in compliance to out of compliance. One way to address that, if that is an issue for jobs, is to eliminate the steps altogether and then determine where people are going to be going through the salary range and by what percent and so on, and just eliminate steps if you're going to go that route. But if you're going to start limiting the number of steps, that's where you're going to run into problems.
Yeah,
except for female-dominated jobs. If you reduce the steps for female-dominated jobs, you're going to be better off.
Yeah, that helps. And there's a big nine school, I won't mention which one, but they're out of compliance. And so they solved it by reducing they eliminated steps 1 and 2 from the teacher contract, because then when a teacher is hired, they have fewer steps to the max. And so that's one way they addressed it. So there are all sorts of different ways of doing it. The key though is, like Mr. Bjorklund said, is you try to lower the number of steps for female-dominated classes while keeping the male-dominated class steps the same, if you can. That's another way.
If there are no other questions, then I'm looking for a motion to approve that pay equity report.
So moved. Second.
Was that you, Vicki?
Holly.
Okay. Your voices sound the same, so from that side of the room, I just hear a voice.
We're morphing into the same.
Where'd everybody go? It's a muffled match.
Yes, that too. Okay, so we have a motion to approve the pay equity report by Ms. Rose, second by Ms. Tower. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
And all those opposed, nay. All right, so that passes.
Thank you, Mr. Bjorklund.
Thank you for being here and answering all our questions.
Good evening.
You as well.
Definitely helped.
Yeah.
It's all based upon the female-male equity was there. That's good reasons why, because of
Inequity.
inequities that have happened over the decades ago, and they just carried on.
We can vote now. That's a good thing.
Oh, man.
Okay.
Thank you.
So then we're on to our committee and liaison assignments. So I believe I talked to everybody about all of these, so nothing should have been a surprise in here to you. Does anybody have questions, comments, concerns? If not, then we just need a motion to approve those committee and liaison assignments.
I'll make that motion.
Second.
Nikki Beth. Second.
Thank you. Okay, so motion to approve the committee and liaison assignments as presented by, motion by Ms. Rose, second by Ms. Buck. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed say nay. All right, that passes. Okay. Next is board self-evaluation. So I contacted Gail. I cannot remember her last name right now. With the Minnesota State School Board Association. And this is basically what she sent me, that there are two options if we want to do self-evaluation through MSBA. So one version is free and has kind of a limited report, a one-page report. The other costs, I believe it was 900 sticks in my head. I know it's in here somewhere. $995. And includes much more information. And I believe that is what you did
2 years ago?
two or 3 years ago.
Most recently.
Yes, that was the most recent version. So I just wanted to see where you guys were feeling about that. If we wanted to, which option, if we wanted to do an option through MSBA, which of those options, and then based on what we decide, I can follow up and figure out the timeline and what all we need to do for that.
From what I understand is the free version is actually the version that we paid for. It's the same questions, you just get it condensed and you get a report saying, here's how you did compared to the last time you took it. That's helpful if it's the same 7 people, I think, but we have a completely different board makeup than the last time we completed it. So it may be to our benefit to, if we're going to spend the time and energy to do an evaluation, we should probably start.
We do a midterm evaluation on him, and then
I know.
we do one on ourselves and all that. We're gonna do like every few months, there's some big evaluations. I think we just wait myself, and wait another year or so.
Wait for the new board?
I just wait for, I'm just saying, we just did it and we moved to some midterm evaluation on superintendent and a full evaluation. So we're evaluating all the time anyway. So I'm in favor of waiting, so I have to be in my.
I think the piece about and I agree, I mean, I don't have any problem waiting either. The piece about the school board self-evaluation isn't necessarily, it's really a good tool to help us stay focused on what it is our goals are and how well we're working together and where some deficits may be so that we can make improvements, so that we're the very best version of a board that we can be that's effective at leading the school district. So it does point out, I think, some weaknesses, and it also highlights some strengths. And then the biggest task is, what is our goal as a board moving forward? Where do we see ourselves as a board? And how do we work with the superintendent to support his goals and for him to support the greater goals of the district? So I think that's the whole background. Gail Gilman is a great resource. I
looked it up in my email. Yes.
I'm good with waiting though.
Other thoughts? Or would doing the one page be a happy medium to not have the cost, but still get some of the information, but not be as robust? Thoughts?
Prior to us doing it that summer, when was the last time the board did a self-evaluation?
Probably 2 years prior to that. I think Jamie had done one before I did, so.
It's kind of been a regular,
Every year.
every couple years kind of thing. So this summer coming would be the second year, because we didn't do it last year, we did it the year before. Right, so if we stick on a 2-year plan, that way we catch.
We did it we did it virtual.
We did it in 20.
It was when
That's a
the
big
pandemic
20 then.
hit, right when
That
the
was the
pandemic.
summer of 20. That was sitting in Florida.
So you two were on that meeting?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Or, yeah, okay.
Are you in Florida then?
Yeah,
For what? Okay, COVID 20, yeah.
yeah. Because we didn't do it the first summer we were on. Because Arlen was chair, then you were chair, then we did it that summer. We didn't do it last summer, so it would be this summer if we stick on a 2-year, which you get new board members then, and then you kind of have an idea of what it's like when another set of board members come in. So just keep some continuity. And it's a good reflection.
I like the combination of both your ideas. Maybe wait a little bit longer and then pay for the,
Yeah, it's,
because I like that idea that, you know, it makes sense. That the basic one would be fine if there was consistency on the same people, but there's not, so. I'm always in the business of picking myself apart and doing better, so, that's just my 2 cents. I'm in favor of meshing both your ideas together.
Did you have?
I'm just not into more surveys or doing whatever, but, if we're gonna do anything, I would prefer to stay towards the no charge one and just see how it works, because I don't know if we've ever tried it. It'd be good to ask the questions and get the results, and it doesn't, I guess if we see a problem, my thought is we could always progress to something else later or realize it.
Yeah.
If we feel there's a problem now, but
The other thing is we got quite a bit on a plate right now, you know, and,
yeah,
especially this new workshop process is working, and this,
referendum.
referendum, if you want to do it, I suggest we wait for a while, because
Do you have
there's
a
so much
timeline
going
in
on.
mind?
Huh?
Do you have a timeline in mind? Like, are you
I'd say-
talking
I'd
wait
say
till
like
summer or?
summertime at the earliest. I think maybe digest it more than just then to decide tonight.
Sure.
Because we have to go through grade configuration plus the referendum, and whoever else, whatever
Budget
else.
reconciliation.
Yeah, all this stuff,
Summer's a slower
and,
time, which is when we typically done
that's just me,
I don't know if we'll be
but I
slow this
think,
summer.
What's that?
I don't know if we'll be slow this
you do
summer.
evaluations, we already hear what people say out there about surveys, and we send so many surveys out there, people get tired of seeing that too, but,
I don't know what the free one entails though. Might be real quick.
I believe she said it was the same thing, except that it was a boiled down 1-page report and did not include an in-service. Whereas the longer one, is a couple of hours in that in-service where we would identify, issues, goals, that type of thing, just a little bit more in depth in that. And so the evaluation takes place 4 to 6 weeks before the in-service. So if we want to plan what time frame we would do the survey, and then what time frame we would want to have in-service if we're doing that. You know, just
just a
when do
question,
we want to put it
just
on?
a question, this is my 4th year, on the board?
Third or fourth?
Is it in my 4th year?
Yeah.
Fourth year one, but.
Yeah, I'm in my 4th year. Maybe I'm missing something here, but I think this board's working much better than the first 2 years I got on the board, to be honest with you.
You're missing nothing.
Maybe I'm right, maybe I think I'm right. I think we're working pretty well together. If I'm wrong, at least somebody tell me, because that's the problem, nobody ever wants to tell anybody the truth.
No, but with that said, I do agree with you, and I feel like we wouldn't necessarily need to do an in-service, but if we wanted to fill out the survey, get the synopsis, go over it at one of our workshops, and then if we see a huge red flag on our synopsis, maybe pay for some, further coaching or guidance, but I'm with Jim, this is 100% different, 180% different degree
Well, I was
of rhythm.
here before, but I do agree that I'm on a lot of boards and committees, and this is probably one of the not only most rewarding, most traumatizing, definitely. Oh yeah. Why awareness? Try to wear this every Monday to bring awareness to the residential school area and what they did. But I feel good, about the work that we're doing, and we're it matters, your team. It really does. And so I feel really good about this team, that this is a team that can make the progress that we have all been wishing for a very long time now.
I believe that regardless of the short one or the long one, it's the same exact tool, same exact questions, it's just the long one. They send somebody, we pay them an extra $900 to come and give us an in-service to talk about the results and where we need to take it from there. So otherwise, we can look at it and analyze it ourselves, which I think it's worth doing. And if you get the survey and you don't feel like, I mean, I don't think it's gonna be all that time consuming, but it might be good information.
To do the non-paid version.
Correct.
So if we looked at doing the evaluation, like the survey portion, maybe in June after school gets out, hopefully things are a little bit calmer, and then we would still be able to get those results within the summer when, again, hopefully there are less fires to put out.
Before we go into the school year.
Well, and you know, and it
And
might be really good validation to say, hey, here's where we were 2 years ago and look at where we are now. That might be a really good piece of information for all of us to have. Might feel, I mean, we feel that we're making a difference, but that would be nice validation.
And I know in July, we historically have one meeting, so.
Right.
The second meeting in June and then have the results. August seemed to be a good month. In the past, that wasn't too, there wasn't heavy stuff going on in August.
This August.
I was gonna say.
Okay, but I don't think it's gonna happen again this year.
In the
Also,
2020s, Jim, not the 19.
But I think, yeah, if you want to do it, that's the time I do it, but otherwise, I think our plates are fairly full.
I was thinking January next year.
I wonder why.
Hey, a bad idea, Arlen.
Okay, well, I will reply and say that we would like to do the evaluation perhaps in June, and at this point, we're looking at that free one-page report, but we can always change our minds later, I think, so.
I would assume so, yeah.
All right, great.
Always take our money.
Okay, so next up is considering having a public forum to discuss the grade and school configurations. So this is up for discussion. I would suggest if we're having one to have it next week, if possible. I don't know if we would, depending on how it went, I don't know if we would have enough information to make a decision on the 22nd. If not then the first meeting in March. But I would really like us to be moving towards a decision sooner than later. I think everybody would. So
16th works for me, the 17th does not.
The 16th works for me.
I'm just one person.
anybody else have?
I'm actually free both days.
I can do the 16th.
And I did ask
Kind of looking at.
Jennifer, but I
I'm
don't.
good for anything. I think the big thing is the public gets a chance to speak. I don't know how much the board is gonna do.
You want to hear
I
me?
mean, other than to hear them, and not to say that we could, somebody that couldn't make it could listen to it afterwards if it's taped or whatever.
Or we put this out right away after we decide a date and a time, and if people can't come, they still have the option to give feedback that would be reviewed before that date,
Or at that date.
or at that date.
And there was the option with the learning plan. I don't remember how exactly you set it up, but to receive feedback from people. Because it might be nice to have an option for people to weigh in, not in person. And I don't know if that was more useful than like saying email us, or, you know, if that was an effective means of gathering information or not.
We got a lot of feedback from it, so I think that'd probably be a prudent thing to do. My only concern would be timing, because we want more detailed information about the two proposals, you know, especially with transportation. And if we had starting and ending times, you know, I'll do my best, but if we're gonna get written feedback before the 16th, you know, we'd have to probably send it out on Monday and then compile it on Wednesday. You know, we'll just do whatever we can.
Or if we were, you know, accepting written feedback throughout next week or up until the day of. if we have a forum.
If we're
But
not-
then if people are not able to come, they have a good means to get their voice out there. And then we would have hopefully heard what we need to hear to make a good decision.
We don't want people to have to let us know by it, because we're not making a decision on it. We're still gonna hear something at, say, 6
Oh,
o'clock
of
at
course.
night, so people.
Yeah.
Then we, after the fact, the information's digested.
There could be an aha, oh, I didn't think of that.
Yeah, exactly. They might change their opinion
I would-
or add feedback.
Something on the website, and Robertson, getting her involved right away and getting the word out there to people and through the media. So, what time were you thinking?
5 to 6.
And where, you were talking middle school?
I had
Just put that out.
originally thought middle school because I think that will definitely change, right? I mean, I think we're probably on the same page with that from our previous discussion, but so then maybe the middle school isn't a prudent place to have it because it's already kind of.
Just have it here.
Let's just have it here.
Yeah, I mean, that's an option too, but just thinking that it involves the elementary schools the most, that I didn't know if that would be.
No, it involves
Anymore.
middle school the most, probably. Or it was left the most.
Just make sure it's available and all that.
Middle school is available, the auditorium is, but I'm sure this space is available as well.
This feels like we've already got it set up, invite them in. We're already set, we're already ready.
Okay, so if we looked at Wednesday, the 16th, in the J-Pod at high school, what time would we want to do this? I think 5 might be a bit early for a lot of people. Oh, Lisa is raising a hand. Lisa,
Hi, I just checked the facilities calendar and the schedules. There technically on the calendar is a negotiations committee meeting on the 16th, 4 to 6.
yes, there is a negotiations meeting on the calendar from 4 to 6 p.m. on Wednesday, the 16th. We may not need to have it, and it may not go all the way till 6, so.
Do this, do a 7, so people can eat it all the time.
I'm fine with 7
I'm
too.
good with anything.
7 p.m.,
I'm fine with 7 to 8.
short and sweet.
Yeah, well, it's not, I mean, 3 minutes a person or a couple minutes a person, you know, we could, I would anticipate it to be like public comment.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's what,
Whatever time you pick.
25 people at 2 minutes a person? Go.
Well, we're anticipating a lot of people. We may not. They might have
Right,
decided, right?
Right.
What time did we do the Jefferson School? That was-
It was like a regular
Oh,
meeting time.
It would be horrible.
6 o'clock.
The Red Wing High School talent show is 7:30 p.m. on Wednesday, the 16th.
So let's
6
move
o'clock.
from 6
Let's go
to
6
7.
o'clock.
6
6
to
to
7.
7.
Thank you, Hannah.
Okay. Let's switch.
Okay, going back now.
Okay, so,
All right, now I've written.
Send us an invite.
if we're in consensus about this, should we have a vote on it, or somebody like to make a motion to?
I make a motion to have a public forum to hear community feedback around school planning for the 22-23 school year
On what date?
on February 16th from 6 to 7 p.m.
Good job.
Yeah, in the J-Pod advice.
In the J-Pod at the high school.
That's exactly what you said.
I'll second that.
Okay, so let's see if my notes are legible enough for me to repeat it back. So we have a motion to conduct a public forum to hear community feedback about school planning for the 22-23 school year to be held in the J-Pod at the Red Wing High School from 6 to 7 p.m. on Wednesday, February 16th. Motion made by Ms. Tower, second by Mr. Bryant. Any other discussion?
Yeah, I would say that, instead of just opening it up to having people spew all of their, I want busing this and I want start time that, maybe we really need to hone it in on,
I was thinking of
topic.
parameters, boundaries around the conversation.
pros and cons of, what's better for families, the grade configurations, let's stay focused on that maybe.
Sure.
Versus
Otherwise,
busing and
we
start
could
time.
be here forever. Or maybe people won't get a chance to.
I was gonna add on here, pretty much the same thing as we were suggesting. I don't think we need to change the motion, but to publicize it, to list, in the communication that we're going to discuss, or open it up for this, comments or whatever, discussion, whatever way you want to say it, on grade configuration, transportation. or
Start
buses,
times.
And what else, if there's something else, just put that in the notice to people once they're.
And if they want to address all three in their 2-minute time slot?
Sure.
Or you could split the meeting 3 ways on it.
Yeah, no, I'm hearing two different things. So,
Well, I don't know,
Right.
I'm discussing, I'll be quiet here on that. The motion's there, we're having a discussion. After
We
the
vote on the motion and then decide on the particulars after?
Well, yeah, it makes a good discussion, because you're gonna, if you open it up, then people want to think they can come and talk about just about anything.
No.
We want them to focus on
The
the
top
topic,
there.
The topic.
the things that
Well,
we said.
and are we looking at, so based on our previous conversation, it sounds like we're looking primarily at how we're configuring elementary grades. So,
All grades, actually, the high school.
well, for timing and busing.
No, I'm saying you're going from 7 to 12.
Oh,
right?
yes, yes. But I think we had already, I mean, maybe we haven't, but my sense was that we had already kind of narrowed it down to options C and D, which were 5 through 7 at the middle school, 8 through 12 at the high school. So if we've already essentially decided that, I mean, maybe we need to decide that tonight, I don't know. But if we've already functionally narrowed it down to those 2 options, then is what we're really talking about on the 16th, about how we configure the elementary schools and the start times of those elementary versus.
That's a good idea. I think we put out the public, this is the 2 options we're looking at for grade configuration. We're seeking public comment on it. So,
Yeah.
And not busing and
But
not
it'll
start
include
times?
that. It'll include that.
Including
No,
start
just,
times,
we
but
can, yeah.
not
It'll trend towards that. To be honest.
So if you put, I like how you worded that, Jim, like you were looking for public feedback on
These 2 options.
these 2 options and just
Gotta
leave
go
it at
from
that. That'll help narrow
Narrow
the
it.
conversation down, but there will be people that'll start talking about those other things
Yep.
and that's valuable information too, but it does help to narrow the focus.
Are we going to be reading people's emails or letters aloud to the group?
No.
I don't,
It's just people that come up and sit and want to address the board.
We're just gathering information.
Okay?
And I think we can certainly
I'm
accept
sure
all those
they'll email
other
us
things,
anyway,
but
if they
yeah.
are.
We can accept them, but we're not going to present them to the community. They'll just be emailed to us.
I don't think if I send an email to some people, I'm not so sure I want everybody else to see it.
Right.
If I come public comment, yeah, that's separate.
Okay?
That's what public comment is. Email.
well, I think you can maybe say a sentence on, we've received many
Sure. Yeah,
emails back
depending
or
on
many,
what happens.
many surveys back,
Thank
and
you
we
very
really
much.
appreciate your feedback.
Okay.
All right, so we have this motion on the table. Any other discussion about it?
Can you read the motion,
Yes, maybe. My notes are a little scattered.
please?
Ms. Howard made a motion to conduct a public forum to hear community feedback about the configurations for 22-23 school year to be held in the J-Pod at Red Wing High School from 6 to 7 p.m. on Wednesday, February 16th. Second by Mr. Bryant. Did I get that correct?
Pretty close.
All right, in that case, all those in favor, say aye. Those opposed, nay. All right, so that passes. We will plan on that and
Make comments
yes,
on that?
yes.
Now we're done with the motion, we should have maybe discussed it, it was getting way too complicated. I don't want to see us limited to, the board already made a decision that we're this far on it, I think that's gonna be negative to the public, so that's just my gut feeling. I think I know where the board is headed from what I'm hearing here, but I think we need to hear this forum and then make up our mind afterwards. If somebody wants to say we absolutely believe we should have grades 6 through 8 there, I want to hear it. I don't want somebody to say, well, they already made up their mind that 8th graders or 5th graders are going to be elementary or are not going to be elementary. I want to hear what the public has to say.
Are you saying, don't say these are the 2 things we're looking at, just the topic is
Yeah,
school
that's my
configurations
thoughts.
for 22-23.
I
That's what
wanna
I'm
hear from
hearing
the-
you say.
I want to hear from the public. That's
You don't want to have them within,
Preconceived notions.
Yeah, I
But that's
agree.
just me, you guys decide. from there.
Usually on public comment, or public
form.
input, public comment, there's a topic that they're discussing and giving public comment on. So you have to have something laid out there for them to want to come and give comments on. It could be anything, but you can't just open it up and say, come and talk to us. You need to have something, this is what we're looking at doing, we want your feedback. We're not saying we're deciding this. To
So
me,
and those C and D are the recommendations from administration, correct?
Yes.
So we could say, the board will be making a decision about grade configurations for 22-23. These are the two options recommended by administration, and we welcome community feedback.
There you
So then
go.
if somebody wants to say that they disagree with those recommendations, that is an option, but it kind of also gives them the idea that this is probably where we're headed. If they want to say something that is contradictory to that, great, let's hear it, but it kind of focuses it a little so we're not, it's not.
There's always something I didn't think of when I hear people bring something to the table. There's always, I'm like, oh, I didn't think of that, or, oh, I didn't hear, oh, I never. So I want people to be able to speak freely to what it is they, if they wish it was different, if they want it to be different, that's great. That doesn't necessarily mean that we're going to take C and D and turn them into Q.
Yeah.
But I want to hear what you have to say.
And some things might come out of it that,
I think we're making
You know-
too much out of this.
Yes, very much so. You just need to have somebody with focal point, okay? With ADHD, we're 100 miles an hour. We need to get
focus it in.
That's it.
out here in a short amount of time period, and you guys need to do that too in order to keep focus. So just having a wrangler, like, I think Jennifer does a beautiful, I'm not trying to volunteer her, well, maybe I am, but does a very beautiful job of validating people's feelings, yet keeping people on a very respectable track towards everybody else's time. That's the idea here. We want you to tell us your feelings, but you also have to respect the time limit of everybody else's feelings that are coming in. So just a person of contact of a wrangler, just to keep the flow going. And then I think both points of what you two had said are great. Really wonderful. And then we're not running around in this circle trying to figure out what's going on, like Jim just said. So I say,
We're making too much- we're making too much of it. Let's just get her done.
yeah.
Is that clear as mud?
All right, Ed Robertson, the job's up to you to figure that out.
Good job, Ann. Good luck.
We got it.
All right. So then we just have our upcoming meetings and future topics.
Just a question.
Yes.
Did you say 41 minutes or an hour and 41 minutes? What did you say?
I knew you were thinking about that during the meeting.
Uh-huh.
I was off this time.
Just asking. I don't remember what
I
you said.
didn't either.
So in the board packet are the future workshop topics that have been scheduled. At this point, they are scheduled into the end of March. But if you have other ideas, issues, of course, let me know. And then we are looking for a motion to adjourn.
So, second.
Where did it go?
These two, I'm over here yawning and they're already ahead of me. I'm like, what? And we're not done saying.
And I was
Okay.
like, what?
Motion on the table to adjourn by Ms. Rose, second by Ms. Tower. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? All right, meeting is adjourned at 8:12 p.m.
You were closer, Jim.
I didn't say, I couldn't remember
Stop
what
looking
the
at
title.
me. I keep forgetting my login sometimes.
I forget
Well, I
every
feel
time it's
pretty
in my
awesome that we.
Because I, don't log into this one.
I always.
All
We did get one.
All I say, if Holly hadn't talked so long, it wouldn't have been so long. Maybe it would have been so long.
You know what? We just needed to pick out one community ed class. Just
one.
throw it in there to let everybody know
I'm
we're
just
gonna.
glad that you said that you went to the old driving school.
I just kept waiting for you to say it, showing you the bones and finally you
I'm a
said.
graduate too, but I didn't refresh myself.